Okay, thank you. People recording, you may start the recording at this point. So, welcome to our exciting event this weekend on Sunday, September the 20th, brought to you by on the Interlocutor server. Today we have a very exciting and I think it will be an interesting event here. Something that you may not see too frequently, but you have the chance to see it here at Interlocutor server. Oh, and also, I would like to give my greetings of peace to everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. So today we have a three-way discussion here between three different individuals on the topic of Deuteronomy 18:18. Now, this is a prophecy in the Torah about a future coming prophet, and the three different religions often or usually interpret this passage differently. So, and what's unique about tonight's guest is that we have Yahoodi the Pharisee here, who is an Orthodox Hasidic Jew. Now, when most of us North Americans and Westerners think of Jews, we usually think about people that are in the media. We think about, maybe famous celebrities, actors, or politicians or whatever. Most of those are secularist and Reform Jews, and it's not. And the Orthodox community tends to be a little more what's the word? It tends to be they tend to keep to themselves a little more at times. So, many of you may not have ever personally known an Orthodox Jew or interacted with one. So this is really a unique opportunity for us to hear the perspective of an Orthodox Jew here. So I think that's great. We also have Neo, who is from the United States, but unlike the majority of Christians in the United States, who are Protestants followed closely by Catholics, Neo is an Orthodox Christian, so again, in the West, we mostly tend to interact with Protestants who are very common here, and there are various denominations of Protestantism, and then Catholics, which is, I would say, probably the second biggest denomination, is my guess, at least in the United States, and I'm assuming in Canada as well. But Neo is an Orthodox Christian, so he's going to give us he may or may not, but he may give us an interesting perspective there, and jihadist as well. Is from Saudi Arabia. He is a traditional Sunni Muslim. Now, Muslims, we don't tend to use the term Orthodox that often. That's more of a Christian, designation, or maybe for Jews as well. They use that term. But in a sense, you could consider jihadist to be an Orthodox Muslim, in some general sense as well. So tonight we basically have three Orthodox individuals from their respective faith traditions who are going to give us their perspective on Deuteronomy 18, Deuteronomy 18:18. But also keep in mind, it's not only the one verse that's important. Whenever you read a verse in Scripture, you always want to look at the context of it. So a couple verses before and a couple verses after are important. So, I'm sure our panelists today will talk about, sort of the general, context of that verse as well. That'll be important. So I'm your moderator today, Aziz. So I'll be kind of taking us through the discussion. We have three different segments here. So session number one, each of the participants will give a 10-minute introductory statement. Now, again, it's up to 10 minutes. Again, participants, if you finish earlier, that's fine. Just let us know if you want to yield your time, but you have up to 10 minutes. After that, each one of the participants will be able to make a 5-minute response. Now, in your 5-minute response, you can address either or both of your other, opponents, not opponents, or other participants there. This is not really technically a debate. This is more of a discussion. So, I'll try not to use that antagonistic language, but yeah, your other interlocutors or your other panel, discussion partners here. So you have 5 minutes, and so that session one will take about 45 minutes, and then we're going to move on to session number two. This is a cross-examination, and each participant will ask 5 questions directed to any one of the other interlocutors. The way it works is that and you guys know this already, but just for the sake of the audience, each one of the members can allocate those 5 questions however they like. So, for example, if Yahoodi wants to ask Neo 1 question and he wants to ask Jihadist 4 questions, he can do that, or he could apportion it like 2-3, 3-2, or even 5-0. Again, however you want to. You have 5 questions to ask, and you can direct it to any participant that you want. We're assuming that that segment overall overall will probably take about an hour. Might take a little longer, maybe an hour and 15 minutes or something, but we're kind of shooting for, around there, an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. And then session number 3 will be the question and answer. And we have our a very helpful Lady Jade here who will be monitoring that channel. So if you guys if you guys pull down your channels on Interlocutor server, the Q&A questions only, that's where you would post your question. Now, again, at this point, we are requesting that each member ask only one question, and only questions are allowed to go into that channel. So again, we don't want anybody trolling in there. We don't want any discussions. We don't want any arguments or anything. If you do post more than one question, or if you do comment in there, your comments will be deleted. You will be warned, and if necessary, if people repeat it, they might have to be muted. Hopefully not. But the chat channel is a channel for you guys to discuss. You're welcome to, have fun there, talk to the other members, comment about what you're hearing in the discussion here. That's perfectly fine. You can be a little edgy, keep it PG-13. Don't get too vulgar. Don't be nasty to other people. Try not, don't. Just don't be too nasty to each other, and we'll be fine. You won't have to get warned or muted. So, but that's pretty much how it's gonna run. So, before we get started, do Lady Jade, Pius, or Wayfair, do you guys have anything you want to say before we start the first session? Or are you guys good?
You're good. Continue.
Okay, so the one thing I actually, so we didn't decide this beforehand, but Wayfair or Pius do we have an idea of the order we want the participants to go in? Have we decided that? Okay, sounds good. So Yahoodi, I'm going to start the timer now. You're going to have up to 10 minutes to make your statement, and I'll give you is a 1 minute warning. Is that okay for you?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll give each of you guys a 1 minute warning, and so go ahead. Your time will start now.
Shalom Aleichem B'Rachman Hashem B'Ezras Hashem B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh V'Natzliach. Hello everybody, my name is Yahoodi. Right? I assume most of you know me, but the thing is, as most of you know, I am an Orthodox Jew, as Aziz said, and here I am here to defend the Jewish view of Deuteronomy 18:18, right? And essentially, right, firstly I would like to say, okay, that essentially, we as Jews have carried the Torah from generation to generation, from country to country, even throughout the exile. We have extensive evidence of our proof of preservation of the text as well, right? And we have essentially extensive proof of preservation and originality of our understanding of the text in of itself as well, right? And essentially, first I want to say, when it comes to Deuteronomy 18:18, I firstly want to disclose my view. Is that okay with you, Aziz, to disclose my view firstly? Aziz.
Sorry about that. I just had to unmute myself. I'll give you a little extra time. Yes, that's perfectly fine. Go ahead.
All right. So the thing is, the Jewish view of this text, there are a few, different, different views of these certain verses. However, these views complement each other when they fall back on essentially this verse, this verse of Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 18:15 to Deuteronomy 18:18, mainly relate to simply other prophets to come after Moshe Rabbeinu, whether they be from non-Jewish nations, all right, or in origin from non-Jewish nations, or whether they be in origin from Jewish nations. So, for example, the prophet Obadiah, the prophet, called examples of Jews, non-Jewish nations, right? Prophets from non-Jewish nations. Obadiah, for example, Iyov, right? Obadiah was Obadiah in English, and Iyov is Job, right? Now. And essentially now many other other religions that use this verse, such as Islam and Christianity, will choose their favorite prophets to essentially insert into this verse. The Christians choose Jesus, and the Muslims choose Muhammad. Right now, essentially, the reason why we view this as simplistically as for example, applying to Joshua ben Nun alayhi salam, meaning Yusha ben Nun alayhi salam, Joshua son of Nun. Is because of the fact that essentially there's no disclosure when it comes to when, for example, the like me, you shall raise up a prophet like me. There's no disclosure of whether or not this is referring to something specific, like this prophet will share essentially nearly identical attributes to Moses, or whether or not he shall simply be heated like Moses was heated. Yeah, yes, that is my general view. It's very short, but it's only a few verses, so I don't really have anything else to say so far.
Okay, so at this point, do you yield your time, Yahoodi?
Yes, I yield my time.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. So I did get a question from a chat facilitator. I wanted to ask Wayfair, and this is a good question. So we did not set up a channel for the three panelists to post their references, and so let me ask the three panelists: are there any references, articles, videos, or whatever that you would want to post as evidence? Would you like a special channel for that, or are you okay with the current setup?
I'm okay with the current setup.
And Neo and Jihadist, would you like a special channel?
I would. That'd be nice. Maybe in this category, debate category.
Okay. Okay, very good. Wayfair, would you be able to set up a special channel in the same general category, saying like references, and set the permissions such that only the three panelists and administrators can comment there? Oh, okay. Okay, so should we just kind of keep it sort of the way it is right now with no references channel? Or is that?
Oh, I just need to post just a link to some passages that I compiled. How would that? How about,
Okay. I have another. Actually, I have another idea. And the people recording, if you guys want to pause just for a minute here, we're just gonna take a quick pause here. Wayfair.
That's what I was going to suggest. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, excellent. So Neo, probably within a few minutes, like 5 minutes or so, you should have the ability to post there when Wayfair takes care of that. And also, Jihadist,
Thanks.
if you have anything you want to post as well, any article or link or something, you can post it in the About channel. Yeah, that was a good question by Diego. So thank you for asking that. Okay, so I guess we'll resume the time there. So Yahoodi, you're obviously fine on your time. Let me reset the timer here.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's continue with our event. And okay, so the next person up is Neo, and Neo, you have 10 minutes. I will give you a 1 minute warning. Go ahead.
Cool. Hey guys, I'm Neo Pomilia. I'm an Orthodox Christian, and by the way, in the About channel or section, I posted a link to a website. Yes, it's my own, with a few church fathers talking about Deuteronomy 18:18. They quote it, they interpret it, they say how it was fulfilled by God. And it's interesting, even those who we don't call saints are still in there interpreting them in the same manner. And so I'm glad that we did not call for a formal debate. I've never debated formally, but just a discussion. And so what I did is just write some bullet points down. And I'm not here to attack other views, though I'm very confident that mine is the truth, outside of which there is no salvation. But I'm just here to defend the Christian teaching of Deuteronomy 18:18, according to the scriptures and according to history. So I wrote a few bullet points here. I'm going to just go through those. So first off, we should read the passage. I don't think any of us, maybe Yahoodi read the passage or part of it, a little excerpt of the verse in question. But so we're talking about Deuteronomy 18:18, but we should look at the context of this, and I'll give you the interpretation of the passage. I'm sure Yahoodi would even agree with one of the interpretations. The outside interpretation according to the words. And so I'm going to read actually Deuteronomy 18 verses 15 to 20. And this is from the New King James. I did check a so-called Jewish translation of these works, and it was the same thing, called the JPS Tanakh. But this is from the New King James, same manuscript. And so it reads here, starting with verse 15. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren. Now this is, I believe this is God speaking to Moses. It says, him you shall hear according to all you desired of the Lord your God in Horeb in the day of the assembly, saying, quote, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, nor let me see this great fire anymore, lest I die. And the Lord said to me, what they have spoken is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words, which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded to him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die, or rather be killed. And so the exoteric interpretation of this passage in Deuteronomy is this: that the people at Horeb, where the 10 Commandments were given to the prophet Moses, they were afraid and fearful to hear the voice of God. And so God, out of his love and mercy, sent men to give to them his words. And we read about this in Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5, and even Hebrews 12 in the New Testament portion of our Bible. So, which is interesting. So God's promise that we read about in this passage is fulfilled by all the prophets after Moses. Not just Jesus, though I will defend that Jesus is, he does fulfill this ultimately, and I'll get to that. So, and it was fulfilled by all the prophets after Moses, of the descendants of the ones spoken to, which is why God said, quote, from among their brethren. And so this prophet was fulfilled first after Moses. Now this is where it gets interesting, by the prophet Joshua. So again, this promise was fulfilled first after Moses by the prophet Joshua, whose name in Hebrew is actually no different than that of Jesus' name in Hebrew. As Jesus is just the English transliteration of the Greek name Joshua. We use the transliteration of the Greek name Joshua to differentiate Jesus from Joshua the prophet. And so this fact is not a mere coincidence. It's according to the will of God and according to Christian tradition. So now God has revealed to us that he speaks often in parables, symbols, and allegories. So that according to his own words, his quote, pearls may not be given to swine. And so that those who do not desire to seek, or who do not desire and seek the true light, but, quote, prefer darkness, remain, according to God himself, ever hearing, but never understanding, and ever seeing, but never perceiving. So he cloaks the truth with these symbols and allegories and parables, according to his own words, and we read about this in the Old and New Testaments. We all ought to fear God when it comes to stuff like this. But and he says again that the letter, or the words rather, the literal interpretation kills the soul, but the spirit of the passage, that unseen truth, gives life. And so that's what we Christians believe, and God has revealed that to us. Thank God. So these words of God in Deuteronomy were some which symbolically served as a foreshadow of things to come, with its ultimate fulfillment in Jesus Christ. So again, it was fulfilled by the prophets who came after Moses, the first being, if we were to transliterate his name, his Greek name into English, it'd be Jesus, but with its ultimate fulfillment in Jesus Christ, who we call him the prophet of prophets, the messenger of messengers, and of course, the God of gods, according to what he said. And so the apostles did write of this fact many times in the New Testament portion of our Bible, saying that the Old Testament laws and stories were foreshadows of things to come. And they were fulfilled in the days of Christ and by Christ. So my next point is this. It is Deuteronomy 34, verses 9 to 12. Now, in the passage we just read, God said to Moses that the prophet to come would be like him. Now, when I say the prophet to come, this includes all the prophets and, of course, God himself, the Messiah. So you said to Moses that the prophet to come would be like him. And so the question is this: what is it for a man to be, quote, like Moses? He can't just be any guy. How do we know which factors of Moses' life to take out and consider, and to say, look, this man fulfills the following things? What's the criteria for that fulfillment? Excuse me. Now, we're going to read the passage in Deuteronomy 34, verses 9 to 12, and it reads like this. To give you some context, I'll give you a few verses. Now, Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. So the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord commanded Moses. But since then, there has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, who, now here's where we get the criteria for someone to be like Moses. So again, but since then, since Joshua, or I'm sorry, wherever there was, since then there has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face in all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, before Pharaoh, before all of his servants in all his land, and by all that mighty power and all the great terror which Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. And so we get the criteria right there. Knowing the Lord face to face and performing signs and wonders. And of course, from the previous passage, he must be amongst the brethren of the people he's speaking to. And so Jesus Christ did fulfill this criteria. Of course, I think even Muslims would believe the same thing, except for one. For what it is to be, quote, like Moses, according to the passage in Deuteronomy 34, is this: by performing the spoken signs and wonders by his power, as we read about in the Gospels, which he did fulfill. And
1 minute remaining.
Quote, okay. And by, quote, knowing face to face God the Father in an infinitely greater, incomprehensible, and ineffable manner than any man could possibly do. Jesus Christ being God's own logos, the image in his heart, known, seen, loved before all things. Even Christ himself says no one knows the Father except he himself, the Son. And so surely he fulfills that. I only have 1 minute. I'm just going to skip through these points real quickly. Church Fathers in history. So the historical interpretation according to the ancient Church Fathers, I put that link up in the About section. You can check that out. First off, we have St. Peter himself, as we read about in the book of Acts, quoting the passage in question, saying that Christ fulfilled these things. We have St. Cyprian saying the same thing, to say the least. It's not limited to him. And we have him quoting Jesus as well, saying that this prophet Moses did speak of him. Many other early church fathers, even heretics in the early centuries, do speak of the passage in the same exact manner.
Time.
Including okay. What time? Okay.
Yep.
Right.
There we go. But okay. Good job there, Neo. So that concludes the Christian introduction here, and then we're now going to move to the Muslim perspective on Deuteronomy 18:18 with Jihadist. Okay, Jihadist, you have 10 minutes, and go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace be upon you. My name is Jihadist, although I sometimes go kunya on other servers as Abu Jihad al-Hanbali. I would like to begin by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Benevolent and the Most Merciful. Praise belongs to Allah. We praise Him and we ask Him for guidance and forgiveness. And we seek protection in Allah from the malice of our own souls and the evil of our actions. Whomever Allah guides, no one can lead him astray, and whomever He makes astray, no one can lead him back to the right path. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, by His absolute lonesome, and I bear witness that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a slave and messenger. With that being said, I am glad and honored to be taking part in this three-way discussion between two dear and wonderful colleagues of mine, Neo and Yahoodi. This is definitely an opportunity for all three of us to expand our knowledge and understanding to those who are willing to learn and understand each of our Abrahamic beliefs. This truly is a historic discussion. It's extremely uncommon to see these types of discussions where all three Abrahamic parties are present. And I truly do believe that this conversation will not only be beneficial to first and foremost our brethren in faith, but to all those who seek collective intellectual knowledge on such a topic. My side today will more so focus on the pragmatical aspect of Deuteronomy 18:18, based off preceding and existing revelation, and how it comes into conformity with Islamic faith, and how the prophesied individual is no other than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that in itself is in full conformity with every understanding in Judaism that it refers to non-Jewish prophets unlike Deuteronomy 18:15, which specifically instructs it to Jewish prophets. I want to make it clear, though, that within this discussion, I don't plan on attacking either party, as we both affirm Isa ibn Maryam, or Jesus the son of Mary, and Musa ibn Imran, or Moses the son of Amram, as being crucial prophets who did introduce such revelations. Rather, we shall focus on the importance and the highlight of the meaning of the verse and what it is held to be understood within our faith, and defend it justly and with honesty, such as the duty of every Muslim. I'm sincerely sure of both parties being absolutely genuine and maintaining heavy and expected honesty. As I mentioned previously, the two opposing party members are well-known members of the community and dear colleagues of mine whom I have no doubt will try their hardest and absolute best to make the conversation as fruitful as possibly can be. Inshallah, God willing, in this historic productive conversation, it produces an everlasting impression on all listeners, as is the intention of all Muslim speakers and listeners alike. Thank you. I succeed the rest of my time.
Okay. Sorry. Let's see. Am I unmuted here? Yes. Okay. So, jihadist. Okay. Yes. You have. Okay. So. Okay. Very good. You cede your time. So now we're going to move on to sort of the response section. So we're going to go to each one of our panelists. You have up to 5 minutes to respond to either or both of the other two members on the panel. And we're going to start with Yahoodi. So based on what Neo and Jihadist said, you have up to 5 minutes. What is your response to either or both of them? And I'm going to start your timer now.
All right. So the thing is, okay, when it's yeah. So the main thing is, right. So Neo's main point, okay, was that essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, Neo. And it was essentially, the each of the prophets had fulfilled this role, but then the final prophet, which was Jesus, had fulfilled essentially Deuteronomy 18:18. Now, Neo, I believe, and once again, correct me if I'm wrong, agreed with me on the statement that it is not specified within the text whether, how essentially the prophet will be like Moses, whether he will be listened to like Moses or he will do actions like Moses. I do agree, but the thing is that the issue, the primary issue, the thing that I mainly disagree with Neo on is that essentially, if you can go down a few different routes when it comes to Deuteronomy 18:18 and when it comes to being a prophet like Moses, okay? But we do see that the Jesus of the New Testament was not a prophet like Moses whatsoever. Okay, Moses, right, for in the first place, okay, was of course a military general. He led millions and millions of people out of Egypt, out of exile, right? He established, he helped establish essentially a large kingdom, right, with Yoshua ben Nun alav shalom as his medium, right, to do so. He performed, many different miracles. He brought fire down from the heavens, right, etc. And he had multitudes and multitudes and multitudes of followers, entire nations looking to him and recognizing him as a prophet. Even in the book of Numbers, we see that the nation of Moab, right, had even recognized Moshe Rabbeinu, right, Moses, as a prophet, right, and even though they were extremely sinful. But essentially, okay, the main thing, of course, the main thing is once again, right, is that one could argue, well, of course, there's similarities between Moses and Jesus, for example. You could argue Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. This is concurrent with Moses spending 40 years in the desert. Now, while I disagree with this as a comparison, the main issue with this potential statement that one could make is that for example, Moses never entered into the land of Israel and decided to stay outside of it. He never stepped foot, he never set foot in it whatsoever, and he died outside of it completely, right? So we can see that many, the main Christian arguments in favor of saying that this verse is fulfilled in Jesus, right, have a variety of flaws, right? And secondly, I do want to point out as well, it does say, it says, in the following verses, right, that if this prophet shall speak in other gods, right, in the name of other gods, he shall die, right? Or he will say things that I did not command him to say, he shall die, right? And in the sense, he shall die, in the sense being here that he shall be put to death, right? Here, let me show you the word. Hold on. There we go. So the word is right is is a vash vasher yidabayim b'shem elokim achayim imais hanovi hahi, meaning right. Or he, so for the entire verse says, but any prophet who presumes to speak in my name, an oracle that I did not command him to utter, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. One could argue as well in response to this that Jesus Christ, right, was raised from the dead and then he ascended to heaven. While I do have an issue with that narrative, with that narrative in of itself, right? The main thing is as well, this is an insufficient response considering that regardless, Jesus Christ had still been put to death and it was still executed. And regarding the idea that this is referring to, Muhammad, right, the prophet, the prophet of the Arabs, right? I disagree as well because of the fact, okay, that the implication in the text here, while I do concede that it could, of course, could be a prophet pertaining to the Jewish nation, we see primarily when it says that you shall heed, right, or you shall heed him, right, like you have heeded me, for example.
1 minute remaining.
Okay, it is referring to essentially the same ummah, right, the same, the same nation, of course, along with, of course, plenty of others, right, in generality. Of course, listening to this prophet and heeding this prophet as well. He will be recognized by these nations and he shall have succession, right, from other prophets. Okay. We see that, and we'll finish with this, right? We see that throughout the entire Tanakh, okay? There are prophets in every generation. There are things such as, for example, you can find in 1 Kings chapter 2, a group of people called the Bnei Nevi'im. The Bnei Nevi'im were called the children of prophets. These were people who were literally students of previous prophets, right? And among them, there would be a number of prophets, either like possibly 1 to 3 even, or possibly even more, chosen to be prophets as well, right? But we do not see that Muhammad nor Jesus had a line of succession to them, nor did John the Baptist. Of course, one could argue that John the Baptist, was the one who, was the one who essentially put his succession upon Jesus. We do not see a line of succession going down to John the Baptist, and even as well, John the Baptist was not even recognized by the nations. But every other prophet, according to Jewish tradition and according to textual observation, was indeed the successor of another prophet, or was recognized as a prophet by other prophets.
Time. Okay. Already. So next up we have Neo. So this is your chance to respond to the introductions. You may respond to either or both of the other panelists here. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I do agree with Yahoodi's or Yossi's objections against Islam when it comes to this passage. As for his first point, he says that the passage does not say what, quote, like Moses means. But I did read the passage from Deuteronomy 34, which I believe does tell us. It says, like Moses is to perform signs and wonders, in other words, miracles, and to know God face to face. With Muhammad, I don't believe he knew God face to face, but was instead, according to what they believe, Muslims believe that God sent angels to communicate to him. We believe as Christians that God spoke face to face, metaphorically speaking, to the prophets, with Jesus Christ being in an ineffable manner, him being God's own reflection, a metaphysical reflection in his mind. And so, again, Christ does fulfill the things, the criteria of what it is to be, quote, like Moses. As for his lineage, he is a descendant of we have the lineage recorded in the scriptures in the New Testament, and he does fulfill that too. I'm trying to remember the other points that Yahoodi brought up. I wasn't writing anything down. I'm just going to repeat this again, though. This is key. That well, first off, Yahoodi must prove that the case which I represent cannot be according to the scriptures. Jihadists, forgive me, I didn't really hear much from you, but I believe that you must provide an ancient and historical interpretation of this passage according to your own beliefs. Especially when I know that most Muslims believe that the scriptures were corrupted. And so I'm not sure why, with all respect, that you would interpret this passage and claim it as your own. I would think that a Muslim would just say, I have no quarrel I have no place to speak when it comes to that passage. You can correct me if I'm wrong, though. So I want to say this one more time, that we believe, according to what God has revealed to us, that there are exoteric and esoteric, don't be scared by the word, esoteric interpretations of passages, mystical interpretations, allegorical, symbolic. He spoke in parables often to cloak the truth, to hide this gold, or as he said, so that he didn't cast his pearls before swine, didn't give his holy things to dogs. In other words, to those who didn't want to see it. And so the so-called Jews, who we believe are apostate Jews, even during Christ's time, they objected to him. And so seeing what our historical interpretation of this passage is, again, you can check that in the link I posted in the About section. And according to the scriptures themselves, being the New Testament and the Old, when it says what it is to be, quote, like Moses, even ancient heretics, like I was saying, this is the case. And so I'd like to even read some of Christ's own words. I think this would be interesting. I'd like to hear what Yossi would say about this. But Jesus said this to the apostate Jews of those times, who rejecting...
1 minute remaining.
Sure. Rejecting the Father and God of Christ. They claim to abide by the teaching of the prophets, as they still do today. Him saying, I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. But if another comes in his own name, you will receive him. And he spoke of the false Messiah in that passage. And he also said, if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? In other words, you don't really see what he truly said. So you're not going to understand that I am the true Messiah. And lastly, he says, if Abraham and God were your father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Nor have I come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Because you are not able to listen to my word. You're not able to perceive. In other words, you are of your father. And that's when... that's
time. Okay, so now we have Jihadist who will respond to either or both of the other two panelists. Jihadist, go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Well, first and foremost, the one thing that I wanted to address straight off the bat is the understanding of the corruption between the Injil, the New Testament, and the Torah, or as the Christians call it, the Old Testament. First off, in Islam, we stand to hold true that the Injil itself is corrupted in its entirety because there has not been direct scripture from Jesus, but rather from his students, despite Jesus' proper full ability to read and write. We believe, as stated in our faith, that Jesus proceeded to give his own understanding and what was given to him by God as the Injil, and that's what was presented. And we believe that everything that was copied off of was horribly mistranslated or lost in understanding, seeing as we don't know the true name of these individuals, nor do we know their true entities, nor do we know the exact times that some of these books were published. For example, John was only incorporated in 90 AD, 90 years after Jesus' death. And this in its reality is no confirmation that John even had any relation or understanding to what Jesus was. In fact, the Ebionites would predate John and his book. So we would say that the Injil, although being horribly corrupted, but the Torah, we would say that it is not entirely corrupted. There are some parts in the Old Testament that we take to be true. Proof being was that the laws that were given to the Jews were affirmed by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which I will provide the hadith for and also the Quranic references for after I'm done talking in the in the About channel. The second thing that I did want to address is that, yes, although the Jews do not take into understanding that it refers to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they rely on this definition that it is, at the end of the day, a non-Jewish prophet, and the understanding of being like Moses hangs in the balance of comparison. Whereas they say Elias more so was like Moses than Muhammad. And they don't believe that after Elias there would be a non-Jewish prophet anymore. However, in the Islamic narrative, we say this didn't refer to Elias to begin with, as we can see more similarities between Moses and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam than Moses and Elias. They both were very strong individuals, as we see with Moses when he essentially shoved an Egyptian and he ended up dying. And we can also see this with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he wrestled Rukana, who was essentially the biggest, toughest man in Quraysh, and beat him in a wrestling match 3 times in a row. Another similarity is that they were both lawgivers. They didn't come to fulfill any certain law. They came to rather present laws directly from God that are directly commanded. Jesus, as we all know, came to fulfill the law, not to abolish it or add on to it. And we do believe Jesus is the Messiah, to make it clear, and we do believe in him as a prophet, but no more than that. The third thing, another similarity is that they both were military leaders and led military conquests, while Jesus was a pacifist. Another similarity is that Moses split the sea, and Muhammad ﷺ split the moon. In another similarity, both of them were sent for polytheists. Jesus was never sent for polytheists. He was specifically sent for the lost Jews of Israel, or the lost sheep of Israel. He was sent to people who already believed in God, as he came to fulfill their prophecy. And
1 minute remaining.
Was not sent to give essentially an understanding to such polytheists. Meanwhile, while Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Moses both essentially were sent for polytheists and have succeeded with God. Whilst Jesus, as we can see as well, at the end, the succession was more so on the understanding that he conformed and ended up being hung and crucified, whilst Moses and Muhammad continued to live and die of natural causes. So I think at the end of the day, the definition of like Moses loosely hangs in the balance.
Okay, okay, that's time. Alrighty, so let's move on to. Oh, sorry, I got a little random message here. Let's move on to the next section of our event today. So now we're moving on to session 2, which is a cross-examination session between the participants. Now for these questions, guys, just keep in mind we don't have a time limit, for your response. We kind of figured, we estimated roughly 3 minutes or 4 minutes to answer a question. If it ends up being shorter, that's fine. If occasionally it ends up being, sometimes if it's longer, it's fine. We kind of want it, but just keep in mind we want to shoot for around 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes. Like I said, for the most part, if you go a little over, not that big of a deal. But if every question it's like a 10-minute answer, then we'll have to start, cutting down on the time and things like that. So we're just going to go one by one, and you have an opportunity to ask either of the two participants a question, and that participant, will go ahead and then answer it. So we're going to start with Yahoodi first. So your first question, go ahead and ask either of the two that you'd like, and then they will respond to you.
All right. Neo, I have a question for you. So the thing is, right, is that the primary thing you asked me, or you mentioned, right, esoteric and allegorical interpretations. I don't disagree. Obviously, I don't think any of us disagree that, of course, there are allegorical and esoteric interpretations, of course, in the text. None of us disagree with that statement. However, we have to understand when it is appropriate to apply these allegorical and esoteric interpretations and when not to, right? So, for example, a lot of the allegorical and esoteric interpretations that you would apply to this part of the text have to come from Christian presuppositions. That the 40 days, so for example, there's a lot of essentially shrinking of numbers, right? when it comes to the New Testament, making prophetic comparisons between the New Testament and the Old Testament, right? So, for example, there were 12 apostles instead of 12 tribes. There are 40 days in the desert instead of 40 years, right? But the thing is that all of these things can only be understood from a Christian presupposition. I want to ask you, right, how essentially can we understand these things without a Christian presupposition, or how can we apply these things objectively? Like, for example, I'm not even giving you Jewish midrash, right? I'm not even citing anything from midrash. I'm only citing things from the text itself because I know Christians will reject it. But yeah, so can you please tell me how we can apply these things objectively?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have two answers. Now, first and foremost, I will say this, and you would say that I say it out of bias as a Christian, but it's by the faith given to me by God. I thank God. I really say that humbly. It's by God's grace, by His Spirit working in us, bringing us to Him, because it's not by works that we are saved. We don't ascend in knowledge to receive faith, or to see, or to achieve salvation, or gain it, or work for it. So I thank God, and I believe truly that God has given not only myself but my Christian brothers and sisters this faith to perceive as we see, and to understand as we hear. And so, again, first and foremost, it's that. Second, we could even go to the text. I believe that it's very clear. First off, according to the historical interpretation, according to the Christian tradition, I'm sure you would not reject that it is the Christian tradition from the first century to interpret the passage in the manner that I do. Maybe, well, that's another topic. So, second, seeing the, and I combine it with the faith and the eyes that I truly believe, I thank God for this, and I humbly say this, that He has given me to see. I believe that the people who call themselves Jews today just totally dismiss certain passages in their writings that clearly state that Christ would be, the Messiah would come to be killed, and that He would even be God Himself. Some passages come to mind. I'd have to think for more and more and more. I haven't taken note of many of them, but it's ultimately those two things. I'm trying to say it with just in a short time. I could say more and more and more and more. But does that answer your question, or is there something I'm missing?
So, please once again correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
What you're saying is that we can apply these things, objectively by the faith given to you.
That's one. Yes. Yeah.
And we can verify these things by Christian tradition.
Verify the historical interpretation of these passages, and if you want to add a third thing, or divide the last thing I said up into a third thing, I believe that those who call themselves Jews today, including you, are the ones who misinterpret the passages in the Old Testament. It seems very, very clear to me, and I think that if I were to give you many passages, you maybe would say, I don't know. And I have yet to hear a historical interpretation of that passage, say from the Talmud or something. It seems that the ideas today are very modern. Even, forgive me, a jihadist, but even amongst the Muslims, I don't think they've ever even known of the passage till recently. And especially they haven't interpreted in the manner they do today. I think they are looking for just something to grab to. Again, forgive me. I say this out of absolute respect. It's just, this is the truth. I will defend it outside of which there's no salvation. I believe that you're just trying to look for something to attempt to prove that you did exist before the 600s. And so that kind of answer your question a little better.
Okay, very good. So that's one question. I'm thinking, although Yahoodi, you did use a one follow-up question, but I'm not going to count that as two questions.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, what can happen here is I kind of this is my first time doing a format, question like a sort of a cross-examination format like this. And sometimes what can happen is that you can ask a follow-up question, and kind of go back and forth, and that can become very long. So maybe the way we'll do it is that you can ask one question, and the person can respond. And if it's like a very quick follow-up question, that's fine. We can let it go. But if you're asking like a different question that kind of opens like a different topic, or if you're going like kind of like really long with a, I mean, you get the point. I'm saying that if you ask like
Mhm.
another longer follow-up question, then we'll have to end up counting that as two questions out of your five. So we'll kind of do it that way, just so that because we don't want it to go like 10 minutes or 15 minutes on one question. So
Mhm.
you get the point anyway. So
Yeah.
let's move to Neo now. Okay, so Neo, go ahead. Go ahead and ask one of the other members one of your questions, and they'll respond.
Well, I have a
Mhm.
question. Hold on. Before this is don't count this as a question because there's a question about the debate.
Okay.
Are we allowed to do like responses to claims said during like questions and answers? Later.
So go ahead. Can you explain?
I said, are we allowed to essentially give responses to answers to some of the questions, right? Like Neo told me about, we are looking for something to grasp onto to prove that we existed before the 600s, right? Our interpretation exists before the 600s. Are we allowed? Like, am I allowed to respond to that later, or?
Oh, that's a good question. So you're saying, so basically, you ask a question, Neo gives his response, and then like you want to have a response to, or are you talking about responding to somebody else's question, or to
To
like a
Neo's.
question that you ask?
To Neo's, the one the answer that he gave me for.
I was actually saying
Yeah.
that to our Muslim friend here. The 600.
Yeah, that's a good.
Not to you.
Oh, you're saying that to jihadists? Okay, never mind. Never mind.
Yeah, saying that they,
Okay. There's
for
no
my
issue.
belief, they grab passages from the scriptures to kind of prove that,
All right.
an intent to prove that they
Okay.
existed before the 600s.
Okay, so I guess that follow up is squashed, but the question, but Yahoodi, you are bringing up a good point. Like, so Wayfair and Pius, I guess the other staff members here, yeah, how should we handle that? Like, do you want to just have it strictly like, like basically when it's your turn, you can ask a question, that person responds, and that's it, and like you cannot like try to counter argue or continue, or do you want to give like members an opportunity to respond to the answer, or how should we do that? Okay. I'll do that then. What I'll do is I'll check the timer and I'll kind of keep an eye on that. So each one of the panelists, like you optionally, so basically you are going to ask a question. Try to make it somewhat straightforward if you can. Try not to make your question like like a 5-minute speech followed by a little question at the end. If you can do that. So try to keep them relatively directed. If but yeah. So then your other interlocutor will respond to your question. They have a few minutes to do that, right? But if at the end, after the response, if you really feel like you want to make a comment or say something, then you can optionally take advantage of that. So we'll give you 1 minute and you just say that I would like to I just say I would like to make a counterpoint, or I would like to respond to that answer, and I'll give you 1 minute to do that. Is that cool with everyone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we'll do it that way. So I guess we just finished our first question, but I think this will starting to get going. So Neo now. No, I'm sorry. Did we finish our second one? I forget. Or are we on Neo?
I
now?
haven't asked the question yet.
Okay, thank you. So
Yep.
you answered my question there. So Neo, okay, yeah,
Cool.
your turn now. You may ask either of the panelists a question. Go ahead.
Sure. So this question is for Jihadist. Now, you mentioned how you believe that Muhammad was like Moses. As the passage says, that the prophets after him would be like him. And of course, we believe that the final prophet was in a symbolic way, to say the least. So forgive me, my Catholic brothers and sisters. You are Christians. I'm not condemning you, but I will use this as an example. As an Orthodox Christian, I do not believe in the Immaculate Conception. I do not believe that. Yes, this is going somewhere, by the way. So I do not believe that Saint Mary never committed a single sin in her lifetime. Now, my Catholic brothers and sisters do use this analogy to the Virgin Mary. We both believe, Orthodox and Catholics, that the Virgin Mary, Saint Mary, Mother of God, is the Ark of the New Covenant, and that the Ark of the Old Covenant was kind of like a foreshadow of her to come, the Mother of God. And so they will, and you can look into that. That's another topic, why she is the fulfillment of that, according to the Christian tradition. However, they say because Saint Mary is like the Ark, well, when we look to the Ark, it was made of, according to the scriptures, incorruptible wood, which they believe symbolizes her sinlessness. And so I ask them, how do you know to pick part from the analogy? How do you know which factors to take into consideration for the analogy? They say because it has, again, incorruptible wood, she must therefore be sinless and be without original sin. So far, this is the majority of Catholics that I've spoken with. Again, forgive me, Catholics, I'm not condemning you for that, but I do believe what I'm saying. That is not honest. Now, again, because the scriptures don't tell us how many factors to take into consideration of the Ark and for the foreshadowing of Saint Mary. Now, I ask you, Jihadist, how do you know what factors to take into consideration of Moses to use as evidence for what you believe is the fulfillment of that passage in Deuteronomy 18? Seeing the passage in Deuteronomy 34 that I've quoted and explained, it says to be, quote, like Moses is to, quote, know God face to face and to perform signs and wonders. I believe that Muhammad
Neo, you moved a little bit away from your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. One sec.
Oh, there we go. You're hearing it.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now you're
okay. Okay, just I'm almost done. Thanks for waiting. So, what was the last thing you heard? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I got every point in. Or was it just for a second that I cut out?
It was like for a second.
Just okay. So, Jihadist, how do you know which factors to take into consideration, seeing that I've quoted and explained Deuteronomy 34, which says that to be, quote, like Moses is to, quote, perform signs and wonders, in other words, miracles, and to know God face to face. It's my understanding that, according to Islam and its tradition, that Muhammad was sent angels, and he didn't know God face to face. It is also my understanding that Islam teaches that he did not perform signs and wonders or miracles. I read this from a few people who at least call themselves Islamic scholars, and they did say that. I did not put aside the passages, but so what do you have to say about that, Jihadist? How do you know which factors to take into consideration?
Well, as we know that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm first going to answer the considerations question, and it's a really simple answer. Is that we know for a fact that sallallahu alaihi wasallam Muhammad has not only affirmed that the laws themselves that were given to the Jews and the books that contain laws are true, but he also advised, and he said the Jews have within the full understanding and right to practice such an understanding. But you can see during, for example, altercations with Christians, this would become an issue, not only from the Christian and Muslim perspective, but also from the Christian and Jewish perspective, as we can see from the reign of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he allowed all Abrahamic religion courts to be open during his caliphate, and the Jews and Muslims were in full conformity, but the Christians have been not in full conformity and demanded a lot of things that did not make sense to all of the Jews and all of the Muslims at the time. Furthermore, in terms of the thing that to do with miracles and speaking to God face to face, I posted in About channel direct evidence that indeed Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did speak to Allah. And we all know that in every single exegesis in Christianity and Judaism, when it says that face to face with God, it doesn't mean that they are literally, in literal understanding, looking at God and God is directly looking at them back, because we all know that God isn't a bush. His physicality isn't a bush. But we can see here in Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 253, it says, those messengers, some of them we caused to exceed others. Among them were those to whom Allah spoke, and He raised some of them in degree. And this, we say, refers to Moses and also Muhammad with the Isra and Mi'raj. Ibn Kathir says, among them were those to whom Allah spoke, meaning Musa and Muhammad, and also Adam, to a hadith recorded in Sahih Ibn Hibban from Abu Dar. Now, in terms of the miracles, we say, this is how we put it. We say no miracles are done by these individuals themselves. These were all miracles that are done by God at the request of the prophets, or when the prophets are presenting the religion. So in actuality, we say Jesus did not do any miracles either. Neither did Abraham, neither did Moses, neither did any of the prophets, because it was all miracles done by God in essentially for the prophets. And in the general understanding that we have is that Muhammad, Allah has provided for him a lot of miracles and wonders, including which the moon has been split. Another miracle and wonder where he fed out of this tiny, essentially, bag of water, he fed an entire tribe, an entire caravan as well, of up to 1,000 individuals. Another miracle that Muhammad ﷺ done is heal the sick. Another miracle that he's also done is also heal the blind. He offered to heal the blind, so we know Allah would have granted that if the man had requested to be healed of his blindness, but instead he chose to wait and receive a better reward in the afterlife. And as such, we can see that many miracles were provided for Muhammad ﷺ. And the reason why we use the word, and you'll notice this with a lot of Muslims, say the word provided for. A lot of miracles were provided for this individual, is because we don't believe in generality that these individuals had any supernatural powers. They're human, just like you and I. The only difference is that Gabriel talks to them and reveals himself to them and tells them what God wants of them. If you look in the About channel, that's where you could see I could reference this understanding. And here as well, I will also reference this, which is another thing during the Mi'raj, which is in, if I'm not mistaken, Sahih Bukhari. You can see it here in the About channel. So yes, in Islam, we do confirm that Muhammad ﷺ spoke to Allah, and we interpret that as being face-to-face, but there was a veil between them. And the second thing that we affirm is that Muhammad ﷺ affirmed the laws in the Torah as being, yes, they are given laws. And we say all other understandings that the Jews don't have in terms of these laws would be a horrible translation. For example, all Jews would understand the laws that were given in Deuteronomy. Meanwhile, Christians don't tend to follow that and call that ceremonial law instead. And just essentially, and I don't want to sound rude or anything, but essentially toss it down the drain. And we say that is a horrible misconstruement. So we do affirm the books that maintain these certain laws and their punishments. We don't affirm every single thing in the Torah. We affirm some, with the ones that maintain the laws. We do affirm that the Prophet did speak to God, Azza wa Jal, God the Almighty. And the third thing is that we do affirm that indeed, as with the understanding in Deuteronomy 18:18, Muhammad, yes, he did do, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did do miracles that were provided for him.
Okay, Neo, do you have an optional follow-up comment to that?
Yeah, there's a lot
for
there.
1 minute.
So sure. There were a lot of points there. It's just I'll start by saying this. Again, so you named a few more things. You named the splitting of the moon, which you believe, and stuff like that, and all these other things which you say were quote like Moses. Now, do you have a passage in your writings that say that Muhammad must be like Moses, or that the prophet to come or prophets that come after Moses must be like him? And if so, does it tell you the criteria which such a man must meet? Again, you, I believe, are taking into consideration factors that just aren't relevant, like all these other things that you did name. Because I can make it look like, Abraham Lincoln is a fulfillment of Jesus or something by saying, Jesus set the captives free in Hades when he descended there for 3 days and 3 nights, and Abraham Lincoln set free the African American slaves or something. I can go on and probably find infinitely many analogies, if you will, with that. And so, how do you know which ones to take into consideration? As for me, I take the prophecies that Christ fulfilled, each one of them, and they were said with a spiritual significance.
Okay,
that's it. I don't want to go over my time. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. I'll stop you there. And maybe what I'll do is I hadn't actually thought about this, but I may end up putting like a 5-minute limit on the answer or the response or something, just to kind of keep it going a little bit. So we'll see. I may adjust the rules a little bit as we go along. But so now we turn to Jihadist. So you have a question to one of the other panelists. Go ahead.
Sure. This question is to Neo. And my first question is, can you provide the evidence that the Greek was reliably transmitted from Aramaic and or Hebrew prior to the Greek translation?
Evidence that suggests that the Hebrew was translated into the Greek, which we call the Septuagint, before the translation existed? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, Hebrew or Aramaic.
Okay.
In regards to the New Testament.
Can I?
I'm sorry. What was
Can
that?
I comment on this or no, Aziz?
If you'd like to, sure.
But the thing is, it's directed to Neo, right?
Just trying to understand the
Neil,
question first.
Yeah. Neil, you can finish.
Yahoodi, I'm wondering. I'm just trying to think how to do this. Well, how about this? You could. Oh boy, that's kind of difficult. Yeah, if you want to comment on it, maybe what you could do if you really want to. The thing is, maybe you can use one of your questions to kind of direct and, like, let's say if you want to comment on Neo's response or Jihadist's response, like when it's your turn for a question, you can ask a question about that, as well as use your follow-up 1 minute, to make another statement. And that's probably the best way you can do it, because the thing is, at the end of the day, it's not about like this cross-examination session. It's a little different. It's really about. You have the power when it comes to questions, and you have the power when, like, somebody asks you a question to respond to that, but you don't necessarily have that much leeway here in this segment to kind of bring your to respond to points other people are making. So we'll kind of have to do it that way. So again, if you want to ask a question about that, Yahoodi, you can, and when it's your turn, bring up a question and then do the optional follow-up and make a statement. We'll do it that way. But go ahead, Neo.
May I clarify my question? Because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Neo understood my question.
But sure. Go ahead. Restate your question for Neo.
Please,
Yeah,
thanks.
So, can you provide evidence that the Greek was reliably transmitted from either Aramaic or Hebrew prior to the Greek translation? And if that this is going to go to the Septuagint, can you provide the Mishnah line that they made to prove that their Septuagint translation is actually accurate?
Okay, so I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding it anymore, but you did repeat the same thing according to what I remembered. Now, I'm wondering, though, how am I going to provide evidence that the Greek translation was a good translation if the Greek translation didn't exist yet, according to your question? How do I do that?
If I could jump in there, sorry. Jihad, it's just to clarify your question. Are you asking about Are you asking about the Septuagint of relating to Deuteronomy 18, the Septuagint translation of Deuteronomy 18? Is that what your question is about specifically?
Correct. Yeah. How can they essentially can they provide evidence that it was reliably, I guess, transmitted from Hebrew to Greek? And what was the missional line that they used as Jews to essentially validate their translation?
Man, I'm sorry, my thing just cut out. Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah.
My thing
Sure, yeah, of course,
crashed.
Man. Yeah. No, of course, man. So essentially, to put it in short, can you provide evidence that it was reliably transmitted from the Hebrew to the Greek prior to prior to Christianity, and as well provide the Mishnah line that the Jews use to validate their translation, seeing as that it's necessary for Jews to make a Mishnah line every single time they translate from the Hebrew.
I see. Okay. So you're saying prior to the Messiah coming, can I provide evidence which suggests that the translation was good?
Via Mishnah line, basically.
By mission line, I cannot via mission line, but we, as I said before, yep. We, as I said before, do believe that the people of today who call themselves Jews, who merely call themselves Jews, are apostate Jews, and so, we can't take what they say word for word. We do believe that they corrupted their scriptures.
No, that's not what he's asking.
The Lord Jesus Christ, God Himself, did condemn the scribes, but my point is this: that it was kind of a little brief before the answer. So I don't know of anything before the writings of the New Testament, but we do know that the New Testament writers did quote the Septuagint word for word in all kinds of places. So that is historical evidence, which does suggest that our version of the Septuagint did exist back then. As for before that, I am not aware currently of any evidence which suggests that it was an accurate translation, say, 100 or 200 years before that. So I will be very unbiased in saying that. Does that kind of help?
Yeah.
Okay, and Jihadist, do you have like a follow-up optional follow-up response? 1 minute.
Wouldn't that affect the validity of the reliability of the chain of transmission if they cannot provide the actual chain of transmission that leads all the way back to Moses?
No, seeing that we believe, and even you believe, that Jesus Christ is the Christ, that He is the Messiah, and that we have His the writings of some of His disciples and the apostles, who, according to historical evidence, were actually the disciples, were actually the apostles. They did quote the Greek Septuagint. Even Jesus Christ, according to these writings, He quoted our Septuagint. He quoted certain passages and prophecies of our Old Testament portion of our Bible, which, when we go to the Masoretic today, they don't even exist. You can't find them, but they are in the Greek Septuagint, and we of course see them in the Church Fathers in all different places of the world, in Rome, in Egypt, in Syria, etc., quoted as we have them today. And they had the Vulgate back then. They had the Syriac back then. They had the Greek and other languages. Even some of them had Hebrew, Saint Jerome. And so, that's what I'll say. Just because we know that Jesus Christ is the Messiah and that His students did quote these passages, we trust that, of course, Jesus Christ would not let His people be led astray by using false manuscripts.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, just to do a little interjection here. So I have a question for the admin and moderator, Wayfair and Pius. So Yahoodi is requesting to respond to a question, to this question. So basically, Jihadist asked Neo a question. Neo responded. Do we want to allow like a third member to respond to the answer of another member, or how should we do that? Yeah. Okay. How about this? I'm gonna. This is kind of a funny. Well, we'll try this out. So I'm gonna give
I can
each
make
one
it
of the
quick.
panelists.
I
Sure.
can
Sure.
make
What
it
I'm
quick.
gonna do. Sure. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you guys, each one of you guys have 2 objections. And so what that means is, for these 5 questions, if somebody else, 2 other panelists are asking a question and you really want to jump in and make a comment afterwards, not an objection, but you can say, I'd like to use one of my 2 follow-up comments, and you'll be given 2 minutes to respond to something that somebody else said. But you only get 2 opportunities. So this is going to be your first of 2, Yahoodi. So go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
So the thing is, right, I do have to object quickly to Neil's response when it comes to the Septuagint, right? So Jihad is asking for a chain of transmission, right, going all the way down to Septuagint to verify it. The thing is, right, is that all of Neil's answers would have to essentially be discerned only from a Christian presupposition and only from a Christian perspective. We cannot objectively analyze the Septuagint, right, and discern whether or not, okay, that it is accurate, even by saying whether or not, okay, the people of essentially the New Testament, right, the apostles, had accurately used the Septuagint, for example. That can also only be discerned from a Christian presupposition. Okay, the reason for that is because, first of all, we cannot discern whether or not the Bible, right? When I mean Bible, I mean the New Testament, is actually actively, is in actuality preserved, right, in essentially in its original form. That we can also assume that the scribes who had transmitted, right, the New Testament to the church, right, whether it be the early church, whether it be the church under Irenaeus, for example, could also simply be using, right, the Septuagint as a proof text, and essentially copying the words of the Septuagint and putting them into the quotes of the apostles, for example. There are also also as well, the importance of jihadist's question, right, is that essentially it is very difficult to verify whether or not, okay, these the Septuagint, for example, is accurate, which is why you would need a chain of transmission. So essentially, a chain of transmission literally shows legitimacy going all the way back to Mount Sinai. Okay,
30 seconds
that's
remaining.
what verifies the Jewish tradition. Extremely, that's what verifies the Muslim tradition in respect to their belief in Muhammad, for example. But the thing is, okay, is that even if the apostles did use the Septuagint, keep in mind as well is that the apostles, we don't know if they spoke Hebrew, for example, and we know for a fact that many of them were even illiterate, even by the standards of the church. John Chrysostom, for example, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. John Chrysostom had said that John was illiterate, right? He said he was completely literate and unlettered, right? So, and at this time, they would have either spoken Aramaic or Greek. So even then, their Hebrew, especially at this time, if they were from what is called Am Ha'aretz, which they were, Am Ha'aretz being the unlearned people of Israel, the unlearned masses, right? They actually would not have had Hebrew literacy. So even then, by this point, if we would even assume that their usage of the Septuagint was accurate and used by them, it would still be a very much an irrelevant point.
Okay, Yahoodi, I'm going to call time there on you. Okay, that's your 2 minutes. Okay, so Yahoodi now, so I do apologize for that. So that uses one of your 2 objections. Okay, so Yahoodi, now we're on round number 2. So Yahoodi, you have a question to ask one of the other panelists. Go ahead. Oh, by the way, what I'm going to do now also, I think some of the answers are going a little long, so I want you guys to kind of keep your questions. Try to make your question within a minute. So you should be able to ask your entire question within 1 minute. And also for the respondent, try to aim for around 3 minutes, but I will give you up to 5 minutes. So I'll give you 5 minutes to answer the question, 1 minute to ask the question at most, 5 minutes to answer the question, but try to aim for 3 minutes. And each of you have 2 objections. Yahoodi is used one of his 2, and your objection is 2 minutes. So okay, go ahead, Yahoodi. Your question number 2.
Can I get another objection? Another question.
Yeah, if you want to use your second one, but then you don't have any more left. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, for now, I would like to use my second objection. My second objection to Neil's argument is that essentially we have not received any sort of evidence from Neil or really anybody the justification for using allegorical or metaphorical or esoteric interpretations and applying it to Jesus, for example, to compare him to Moses, right? We pointed out very subjective and literalist ways from the text in of itself to show how Jesus would not be comparable to Moses, like as a person, nor was he even heeded as Moses was heeded. He was actually very much rejected by the same community as we've established before. So once again, we can see actually why the Christians would need to rely upon esoteric and allegorical essentially interpretations in order to essentially get the answer they want from Deuteronomy 18 verse 18. But like I said, what does this rely on? This relies on a Christian presupposition. Okay, so outside of a Christian presupposition, we cannot see objective textual evidence, nor even objective evidence at all, right? That the allegorical interpretation should be used as opposed to reading it in the pshat, meaning reading it simplistically, or even reading it outside of the literal meaning and simply looking into the deep esoteric understanding, which once again, you will only get the answer that you want to see by doing it without any sort of previous basis, which is what the Christians do. That is my judgment.
Okay, so do you yield your time there?
Yes.
Yeah, 45 seconds. Yield? Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, so before we start round two, something I want to mention. So, Lady Jade did inform me that we can open up our question, criteria a little bit. So, since we don't have many questions yet at this point, and again, the topic is a little more narrow, we are allowing. I will now be allowing each member to submit up to 3 questions, and we're going to broaden the scope too. So you don't have to necessarily ask about something related to Deuteronomy 18:18. You can ask more general questions to any or all of the panelists as well. So you guys see the Q&A channel. Feel free to put your questions in there. So up to 3 questions, and now the scope is broader. So you have a little more liberty. Okay, very good. Okay, Yahoodi, your question number 2. Go for it.
May I at some point respond to Yahoodi?
Yeah. Would you like to use your objection right now? Your 2 minutes.
Just my response to his objection or question.
The thing is, but we don't want it to kind of get into the thing is we have kind of a cross-examination question format, so it's not meant to be like a 10 step back and forth. Like somebody says something, then you respond going back and forth 10 times. So it is a little limited, but we're giving you an opportunity to object twice. But really, what we want is, sometimes I know sometimes you do have to eat it up. You know what I mean? If you want to say something but you didn't get a chance, it's okay. But when it comes around to your question, you can ask a question related to the topic that's burning for you, right? And again, for every question, you do have a 1-minute optional counter response or counterpoint that you can do. So you can use it there. But in terms of jumping in and wanting to respond to somebody, if you want to, again, you're welcome to do that. You've got 2 of them, 2 minutes each. Would you like to use one of your objections?
Sure. I'll use one of my objections as an answer to Yahoodi.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, you got 2 minutes.
Okay. Cool. So we have many passages in the Old Testament portion of our Bible, or the Holy Book. And by the way, the entire time I will say that I've been using the Masoretic text. So I've not used the Septuagint even a single time for the sake of our friend here, Yossi, who calls himself a Jew. So many passages in the Old Testament which do speak of the allegorical truth that God gives. Again, even you believe that as a Kabbalist, that there are esoteric, from your perspective, truths in the scriptures hidden, only seen by a select few, according to what God wills. And so I'm just going to quote a few passages from the Old Testament. Our New Testament portion is just filled. It's absolutely filled with them. And the Old Testament as well, but I'm going to quote a few. It says, "The secret of the Lord is with those who fear him, those who are humble before him, and he will show them his covenant." We have Psalm 91 verse 1. "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." We have Hosea 12 verse 10. I believe this is God speaking. He says, "I have also spoken by the prophets and have multiplied visions. I have given symbols through the witness of the prophets." To say the least, I could go on and on for probably 10 minutes with all of the passages that talk about the secret wisdom cloaked, or the knowledge of God and the truth of God, which is veiled, so that some may not see it. I quoted that passage earlier, which Jesus Christ was saying to the apostate Jews that objected to him and said they don't believe that his Father was God. Remaining. He said to them that seeing the truth, you do not perceive of it, and hearing it, you do not understand it. They could see the words or the letter, but they couldn't see the spirit of the passage because they, in their hearts, really didn't seek the truth, to say the least. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes your first objection. Okay, so Yahoodi, back to you. So your question number 2, go for it.
All right. once again, I do understand that these, of course, that are allegorical and esoteric interpretations. That's not. I never denied this. In fact, I confirmed this. I said earlier that I conceded to it. However, like I said, we still don't understand how we can justify, the symbol. How we can essentially justify proper symbols here, right? As opposed to other understandings of, other
Yehudi, if I
understandings
could
of how
jump in,
symbolism.
Yehudi, sorry to interrupt
I'm
you.
going to give a question.
Yehudi, the thing is, you've used your two objections, so you have to pick a person and direct a question.
No. I was going to give a question. I just wanted to clarify that first. I'm sorry, but
okay, sure. Go ahead, please.
So
go ahead.
I just do have a question, for jihadists as well, because essentially, this does fall into the symbolism category. This also does fall into the comparison category. Well, I do agree that essentially Muhammad filled out the role, right? Much of Deuteronomy 18:18 much better than Jesus did, though I disagree. How can we essentially discern properly in this case, right? That how can essentially we discern properly, right? That Muhammad is the completer, or completes this verse, in his entirety. Aside from bringing laws as well, because like I said before, he was, the verse says that essentially the same ummah, right, will listen to Muhammad, but we see that the Jews in generality have rejected him. So how would you answer to
that? I think that's a very good question. My answer would be just two very simple things. One, the main reason why I would say that it leads to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that, from my belief and my perspective, and I could provide many hadith and Quranic verses, is that he literally fits every single factor of the prophecy. There isn't a single one that he doesn't leave out. Even to go as far as prophethood, they were both prophets. And even to go as far as that Moses spoke to a fellow prophet, his brother Aaron. And the Prophet ﷺ, during the Isra and Mi'raj, he did speak to a prophet. He spoke to Abraham and Moses too, as well, in the Isra and Mi'raj. Now, when it comes to what I believe the second question that's been asked is that, may I request that for the moderator to have Yahoodi repeat just the last question, because I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Yahoodi. Rephrase your question, please.
The last part of my question is, how would one answer to the fact that the text states essentially, from your brothers you shall heed him, right, as you have heeded me. But the thing is, how would one essentially answer to the fact that the same ummah, it is referring to the same ummah here, it is supposed to be the prophet in Deuteronomy 18:18 will essentially be still heard by the generality of the Bani Israel, but we see the Bani Israel have in generality rejected Muhammad. So how would one answer to that?
Well, I would first of all, I would explain that in generality, I don't think Banu Israel rejected Muhammad, but rather I think they accepted his rule and even the rules of his successors. One of the most prominent being Umar ibn Khattab, where a Jew literally told him on passing. I will. I promise.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Where proof of his successors being as well even relied on upon the Jews and Muhammad's words, as all the successors would fundamentally just apply what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught. And even they, according to a hadith which I post many times here, and I'll post it as well and about again, that even the Jew told Umar ibn Khattab that the way that they rule is proof that they essentially have one angel on the left and one angel on the right, and they're both on justice. Not to mention individuals like Mukhayriq, who never converted, and he was a rabbi, and he went and fought alongside Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Banu Tha'laba, that was a Jewish tribe that assisted in the fight against Banu Qurayza. So whilst it seems that yes, there were some people who did resist this understanding, and that's fine, because there were also individuals from Banu Israel who also disobeyed Moses, like for example the ones who went and they worshipped the golden calf. So in the understanding of how we translate it and how we understand it to be is that they would conform and understand and have no problem with the application of the laws that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam applied. And they did, in fact, actually not only agree but follow suit with many of them, as seeing evidence from people like Mukhayriq and Ka'b ibn Ahbar.
I see.
Okay, so is that your response, jihadist?
Yeah.
Okay, Yahoodi, would you like to use an optional 1 minute counterpoint?
Yeah. So
Okay,
the main thing is that even the Jews that disbelieve in, that disbelieve in, Moses, for example, Musa alayhi salam, right? There were 3,000 among the Bani Israel, according to the Torah, that is, there were 3,000 among the Bani Israel, right, who had disobeyed, the words of Moses. The rest of them, right, were the Erev Rav, meaning essentially the foreigner among them, right, meaning the people who did not come from the Israelite nation and essentially immigrated into it when they were leaving Egypt into the desert, right? Yet we do see, okay, for example, that essentially even the Jews that, of course, did accept Muhammad's rules, such as Mukhayriq, such as the other tribes which I did not reject, we don't see them essentially accepting them as prophets, which was my main point, right? With the descendants of these tribes did not heed Muhammad as a prophet, but also. Nor did the people of the tribe of Muhammad as well. But also, even the Jews that disbelieved in Musa alayhi salam, these were not large in number compared to the majority of the Jewish nation. Because and even if they were, right, even if they were in this case, they would of course be killed, right? And even then, it would also be just the generality of the Jewish nation still heeding Musa alayhi salam as a prophet, right? I don't really see this essentially as I don't really see this as saying it is a political heeding. It rather seems essentially more like it is a prophetic heeding.
Okay, time there. Okay, so now we're gonna go to. Okay, so that's your. Okay, so Neo. Now we're on your question number 2 here. Go ahead.
Okay. How many more do I have left, by the way?
We have a lot. So we have actually 5. So we're actually on we're on your question number 2. So then Jihadist has to go with question number 2, and we have 5 questions total. Let me ask Wayfair. Do you think we'll have time to do all 5 questions, or should we do 3 or 4? Okay, maybe I'll reduce it. So maybe I should set should I set like a 4-minute limit on the response on the question? Oh, okay, we'll do that. So you're on question number 2, and you've got 5 questions total. So we still got a little ways to go. And panelists, if you feel like it is, or the mod or the other admins here, if you feel like it is going too long, we can cut it down from let's say 5 to 4 questions, or we can cut the time further. But let's aim for 5 questions right now, 4 minutes max for the response. And if it gets too long, we can cut it to 4 questions. Okay, so Neo, go ahead. Question number 2, and ask your interlocutor.
All right. I am willing to actually give one question here, which will count as 2. I would ask the same question to both of my friends, and in this case, opponents. Can I do that? It's just a very easy question. Very short.
Sure. But
it'll use 2. Maybe they can both answer. Save some time.
Are you requesting that? Do you want us to treat it as 2 questions, or are you requesting that we treat it as 1?
Treat it as 2.
Okay.
I would assume, I just want to, because I'll be asking both people. I'll be giving answers by both.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
That's perfect. That's perfectly fine. And you can choose who you want to answer first, so you can direct it to whoever you want first. And yeah, that's fine. We'll count it as 2 questions. That means, but each person will have up to 4 minutes to respond. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So according to Christian tradition, and historical writings and evidence, we have the interpretation of Deuteronomy 18:18 and the passage, the verses surrounding that, even Deuteronomy 34, like we quoted and explained. We have that starting from the 1st century, starting with the very own student of God himself, Jesus Christ, the Messiah. And they say that Christ was the ultimate fulfillment. St. Peter said that, as I read earlier, if I had a chance to. And we have literally every church father, and even, like I said, even early heretics in the church who were condemned for their heresy. Everybody knew that Deuteronomy 18:18 in its ultimate fulfillment was Jesus Christ. It was talking about Jesus Christ, the Messiah. I'm wondering, from both Jihadist and Yossi, what the earliest interpretation they have is of Deuteronomy 18. Again, we have one from almost every single century, starting from the first. I'm wondering if Yossi has any ancient interpretation. If not, what is the earliest? They have to quote this word for word. And with Jihadist too. He has to quote it word for word from one of maybe the companions of Muhammad or some hadiths or something. What was the earliest interpretation? Or is it just that today you bring this passage up and say, it's talking about Muhammad? So that's my question. That'll count as 2 for both of them. I'd like to hear the answers.
Should Jihad go first or should I?
Can I go first? Because I think my answer at the end will just rely on Yossi's answer. In Islam, the way that we say is simply this. We just say, look, since it's in a book that is affirmed as laws that were given to Jews by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say that whatever that they say upon it is considered accurate from the Jewish perspective. And then we elaborate on that and build on top of that with the ideology and the understanding of rationalism and connecting and the hadith and all that. So we would say that how the Jews interpreted that specific law is fine. It doesn't contradict anything. But what we say is crucial here is that I guess the only thing that could be raised is that even if let's say it stems from an Israeliyat, which is essentially something that is passed down through a Mishnah line or any form of ancient manuscript or text or understanding. If it's an Israeliyat, the Prophet in the Hadith ﷺ, he directly, and I will post the Hadith after I'm done, he directly tells us not to reject nor accept Israeliyat, but to tell the Jews who are presenting this Israeliyat that we believe what they believe. So we would subscribe to the traditional Orthodox understanding of the exact interpretation of the verse in terms of literal translation.
Okay, is that your answer, Jihadist?
Yeah.
Okay, Yahoodi, over to you now. Same question.
Should I ask a different question?
No, so you have to answer Neo's question. If you need him to rephrase it, he can.
Okay.
But same question to you from Neo.
Well, the thing is, I firstly want to say, that our interpretation of this text, for example, when it comes to a certain figure, would be that it could be 2 people, right? Eliyahu Nabi al-Vashallam, or Elisha Nabi al-Vashallam. That is Elijah, right? The prophet, and that is Elisha. And the reason for that being is, for example, many of them had fought, right? Many of them have fought people. Many of them fought, idolatrous nations. They fought people who did sorcery and witchcraft, as both of them did, right? Or Eliyahu specifically did, right? He brought down fire from the heavens, right? So did Moses. He essentially prevented rain from coming and caused, a famine during the time of the rule of, King Ahab, right? Ahab, the king who was an idolater and a pagan, right? He had caused rain to return. He had split the sea. Elisha also had split the sea, or they split the river, I should say, literally splitting waters, right? And walking through them with a multitude of, companions. And I could show you. Now I need to find it again, so I apologize, Neo. After this, I assure you, I will find the chain of transmission for this interpretation. Because we do have it, right? It comes from Yavamos, which is a Masechet in the Talmud, right? But there is a chain of transmission applied to this, and I will show you it later once I find it again. But the main thing is as well is that even without this, let's say this chain of transmission wasn't there. Even without this, right, we could understand this very easily from the text in of itself, right? It is sort of not a very relevant point in my eyes to suggest that because you have this interpretation or this, clear-cut interpretation, from the time of Jesus, that therefore means that it is more correct in any way or more accurate in any way, shape, or form. Because this once again falls under my still unanswered objection about essentially discerning things only from Christian presumption or Christian presupposition. Now, I understand that essentially you're saying this as a result to try and legitimize your tradition. I can see why, but it still does not make the tradition more correct or more accurate in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. And Neo, do you have an optional counterpoint to either of your two members there? And because you use two questions, you can actually use two counterpoints here if you'd like.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see now. So
And 1 minute each for like each counterpoint. You have 1 minute.
okay. So as for jihadist, I'm confused. If I recall correctly, you said that you believe that the Christian scriptures of the New Testament, not of the Old, but of the New, you believe that they were absolutely corrupted, but of our Old Testament writings, you believe they weren't. I'm confused why you would believe that, seeing that the old are older. I think that because it's so clear that Christ fulfilled this prophecy, and even that he was God, I think maybe that's why you prefer to go to the old. To, again, forgive me, but this is what I believe, that you are just trying to grab anything at this point to try to prove that your religion did exist before the 600s. And so seeing that it's only today, it's a recent and it's a modern thing that the Muslims have brought these passages and said, look, Muhammad was prophesied of in Deuteronomy 18:18. It is so vague when it comes to that. I can grab, again, the Abe Lincoln thing. It was a great analogy. So as for Yossi, the points he made were...
You have 45 seconds.
Okay. Trying to remember the points that Yossi made. I probably should have asked these separately, now that I think about it. So, I mean, you're using this passage to as evidence to support your view, but again, so we have the ancient interpretation. It seems like it's the only interpretation in the ancient times until recently. What I've stated, all the church fathers, literally every single one of them, including early heretics, did interpret it in this manner. And Christ does fulfill it perfectly in an ineffable sense, in an allegorical sense, as well as other passages in the scriptures. And so I've yet to hear a passage that just refutes this truth that Jesus Christ was the Messiah prophesied of by God himself and by the prophets. So
okay,
that's what I have to say.
That's time. Okay, very good. Now we'll go to, at this point, we're going to go to Jihadist for question number 2. Go ahead.
Okay. My second question would be to Yahoodi. Can you confidently affirm as a Jew that Deuteronomy 18:18 refers to non-Jewish prophets and definitely doesn't refer to Isa ibn Maryam, peace be upon him?
I can confirm that it refers to any prophet after Moses, whether Jewish or non-Jewish, right? From any ummah, right? Or from any nation, right? And I can confidently affirm that this is not referred to Jesus or Isa ibn Maryam.
That's it.
Okay.
Wallahi.
So we got a quick question there. First time there. All right. So Yahoodi, we're on to question number 3. Go ahead.
Oh, should I ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah, you're on question 3 now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Neo, I once again, I don't really know if I have any really important questions aside from this one, but Neo, my other question is, right, you say you have yet to see a passage which confidently rejects Jesus, right? Jesus, right? As the Messiah, right? However, I do want to say that the main thing that we're focusing on right now is whether or not that Jesus primarily was like Moses, that he fits the description of Deuteronomy 18:18. I could argue the same thing, saying I have yet to see a passage which proves that Jesus is the Messiah. But I don't want to dive, because we delve into Isaiah 53. I don't really want to delve into there, but I'm wondering why you make this point.
May I answer? Just a short answer.
No.
Yeah, Neo, you have up to 4 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. So, I'll answer the second part. Well, I guess that was the question. Why we believe that Jesus does fulfill this. So you said that I forgot which of the prophets you mentioned that they did as Moses did, and you gave the analogy kind of like Jihadist did, and I believe that you are actually right that the prophets which came after Moses did perform miracles and stuff like that, and knew God face to face.
If I could jump in,
what a prophet must do. Yep.
And if I could just jump in and interrupt you, and just to clarify, was that Yahoodi? Was that Elijah and Elisha that you believe fulfills this prophecy? Is that correct? Or?
No. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yep,
yeah,
cool.
just to clarify, it was those two prophets. Go ahead and continue.
Thanks. Perfect. So we do believe that Christ. These were all these events in our Old Testament portion of our Holy Book were foreshadows of the things to come. It's amazing when you read through the Old Testament. It's like every single thing. There's a deeper meaning behind the passage, behind the words. There is the spirit of the passage, that unseen truth, hidden, veiled by a story, which we do believe the story is real too. It's actually a miracle. So he mentioned one earlier, Yossi, which was that Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. Well, our New Testament writings do say that Jesus Christ was the God who led the Israelites out of Egypt. The 40 days fasting and the 40 days traveling to whatever city, forgive me, I'm forgetting the story, but there are so many more that I could name, but I've not committed them to memory. But that was one that he mentioned earlier that it just kind of clicked, and I recalled something from my studies. And so, we believe, and it is clearly seen that Christ, even according to the New Testament, fulfills all of these prophecies. And that these stories of our Old Testament portion of our Bible had a spiritual significance and a foreshadow of the Messiah to come. And our New Testament said this very, very clearly. So that I conclude with that.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, Neo. Now we're actually on. So this is our round 3, but we're on your question number 4. If you'd like, you can go ahead and ask your question number 4, or if you'd like to pass, you can do that as well, and that way you'll get back into sync. It's up to you. So either you'd be like you wouldn't ask a question on the last round, or you could skip like in this round or something. What would you like to do? Would you like to skip, or would you like to ask your question number 4?
I'll ask number 4. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it.
So the topic of the Septuagint and stuff like that, I'm not sure why that came up. It was kind of irrelevant to the topic. If forgive me if I'm just not aware of why you brought that up, both of you. But it was about the Septuagint and the idea that because there was no chain of transmission, no words, through succession about our Septuagint, that it must be wrong. Therefore, I'm curious what Yossi believes, or what Yossi thinks about, first off, Josephus. He was not a Christian, but an anti-Christian and an apostate. He does talk about the Septuagint during his time, and I believe even Philo, a so-called Jew in Egypt, talks about it as well. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that. If there are people before them, there probably are. Maybe there aren't, but I'll have to look into that. I lack knowledge on this topic. Let's just talk about Josephus and Philo for now.
All right.
Even quoting our passages, affirming them. Continue.
Yeah. So Philo, first of all, was unreliable, considering that all of his contemporaries had rejected him, even those among the Hellenists. He had openly acknowledged that Greek theology is superior to and is compatible to and is superior to Judaism, and that the Jews, if anything, should abrogate the Torah and should abrogate their theology to follow Greek pagan theology. So therefore, we consider him unreliable. Yosefin, meaning Yosefin is a Hebrew name, right? Now, a lot of the things he said were reliable. A lot of things that he said are misinterpreted, and a lot of things that he said are wrong. Now, when it comes to their opinion about the Septuagint, right? Yosef's opinions about the Septuagint, we as Jews do acknowledge that there was a time when the Septuagint was not corrupted, right? However, we can see over time that the Septuagint essentially has gone through multiple different unknown phases of inheritance by a multitude of different groups, right? Causing us to lose track of the Septuagint's history, right? And causing us to completely be 100% unsure of whether or not the Septuagint is properly preserved. Their opinions of the Septuagint were only relevant to their time as a result of this. Philo's opinion is entirely irrelevant because of the fact that he was pagan, even in the eye, it should be even in the eyes of the Christians. But yeah, that's my statement.
Okay, very good. Let's see. Now we're going to go to Jihadist. Your question number 3. Go ahead.
My question number 3 goes to Neo. Neo, can you confidently affirm, as a Christian, that God Almighty reiterated Himself in 1818 after 1815, in the Christian understanding to 2 different questions?
I think I'm misunderstanding your question. What do you mean by reiterated himself in 18 as he did in 15?
So in 1815, it says something similar to 1818, but not exactly. But Christians explain this to be essentially the same thing, because they say it both refers to a Jewish prophet. But my question would be, can you as a Christian confirm that God Almighty reiterated the same thing He said in 1815 and 1818 to 2 different questions? Because He was asked a question and then He responded with 1815, and then He was asked a different question and then He just reiterated what He said in 1815.
Forgive me, I think you've misread the passage, but first it's Moses speaking of himself, saying, the Lord your God will raise up for you. He's speaking to, the Israelites, but anyway, some group of people. He's speaking to them, saying, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren, him you shall hear, according to all that you desired of the Lord in Horeb, when they requested of a man to speak to them and to give them the truth, because they feared the voice of God, in the day of the assembly, saying, and that's when he quotes God. So he's paraphrasing God, or I guess giving it according to his perspective, in a sense. Then he quotes God himself, saying, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, nor let this da-da-da-da-da. And then he says here, and the Lord said to me, this is Moses speaking, and the Lord said to me, quote, and this is when God is speaking. This is the quote given to us by Moses from God. What they have spoken is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you. This is when God is speaking to Moses, from among their brethren, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, mostly, but I just have one follow-up question.
Sure.
How do you confirm that this is talking about a Jewish prophet and not a non-Jewish prophet?
A Jewish prophet, not a non-Jewish prophet. I believe that I've not committed to memory the other passages in the Old Testament writings of our Bible, which talk about how the prophets are descendants or of a certain bloodline. But right here he says, from amongst your brethren, which I believe, and according to Christian tradition and the church fathers and the saints, it's referring to those of the same bloodline, if you will, or the descendants of a certain person. And we do have the lineage of Christ and those who were before him in the New Testament, recorded by the saints.
Okay.
Okay, very good. And Jihadist, do you have like a 1 minute counterpoint you'd like to use?
No. I'm satisfied with the answer.
That's right. Okay. So now we will go to Yahoodi. Your question number 4. Go ahead.
I actually need to think. I don't know if I have any more questions. Oh yeah. I'd actually like to rather give a response, but I don't think you're going to let responses right now.
I wonder. Well, Wayfair. I wonder if we could do that. No, we should.
I can make it very quick. But like less than a minute.
Okay, fine. If you want to skip your question, fine. I'll give you a chance to do like a 1-minute response. Go ahead.
So the thing is, Jihad, this question, how do we know that this is, for example, can refer to a non-Jewish prophet? I would like to respond to Neo's response. So first of all, right? Neo, once again, you gave something from Christian presupposition. Neither jihadist nor me, we have not cited, for example, any sort of jihadist has not cited tafsir. I have not cited midrash, right? I mean, the only time I cited midrash was in response to you asking me to, right? Or well, this is midrash, but oral transmission, right? Things that you would reject naturally as a Christian. But the things that you keep citing generally are not textual, right? Most of them come from things that you can only understand and discern from a Christian presupposition, not from any proper textual basis, looking into the text and discerning different things, taking things out of it that all of us universally can't accept, for example, in order to be objective, right? However, as well, how do we know this can refer to non-Jewish prophets as well? We must remember that the Erev Rav, right, the mixed multitude, were a group of non-Jews, right, or people of non-Jewish origin, came out of land in the millions, right, came out of land of Egypt with the Jews, right, and many of them had remained after the Eglah Zahav, the golden calf, right, and so essentially and many of these people were from different nations. Some of them even ended up returning to their own nations, etc., right. These people, like I said, were not Israelite in origin. So as well, and these are because of the fact that they were called the foreigner among them, right? The commandment, you shall love the foreigner, right? We can understand these people as well were considered Achei Yisrael, meaning the brothers of Israel. That is my response.
You know what? We decided we're going to give you another minute and 30 seconds if you'd like to use it. Optional. It's up to you.
Bonagid. Yeah, I think that's all it is, just the answer to.
That's good?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll count that as your fourth question. Okay, Neo, you are on question number 5 now. Would you like to skip or would you like to use question number 5?
Yeah, I am kind of out of questions at this point. Can you give me just 15 seconds? Maybe I could think of something. No, I can't think of anything right now. But so I guess I'll pass. I mean, if I can maybe respond, I can substitute that for a question. Respond to Yossi. Thanks. Okay. So Yossi, of course, yes, I'm speaking from a Christian perspective. Though it seems that I'm the only one who has provided evidence that more than suggests that this is the oldest historical interpretation of the passage. Not only that, it seems like it's the only interpretation ever from any ancient person. And again, it seems that it's a modern idea that this passage means, especially from the Muslim perspective, that it means that it's speaking of Muhammad. And from you, have yet to see anything contradict or go against what we believe as Christians. We see it was fulfilled perfectly in Christ. So that's why I'm speaking from a Christian presupposition. It's just the Messiah came. He fulfilled everything he said he would. Especially when we have our deuterocanonical writings that you don't have, but it says the Messiah was God himself. In these BC writings from the Jews, the true people of God, it says the Messiah was going to be God. The prophet, the Messiah, the messenger, God himself, God's wisdom, the image of his goodness, to say the least. So that's what I want to say.
Okay, so I do apologize. I disconnected for a minute. Jihadist, did you ask your question for this round or no?
No.
Okay, go ahead. Question number 4, Jihadist.
My fourth question is to Yahoodi. Why is Jesus rejected as the fulfiller of 1818? And why do the Jews view the Muslims as having a better substantiated argument?
We read this verse generally in the Pshat, like I said, the Pshat being simplistically, of course, and once again, I'm not saying that there can be no allegory, there can be no esoteric interpretation. However, when we look at this verse and we look at the various ways this can be interpreted, right? So let's just, like I said, we are going from a standpoint that is only rooted in scripture. Okay. So when we look at the understanding of this text in the variety, in variety of ways. So for example, could it be understood that this person is only heeded as Moses was heeded, and that he, Moses was heeded as a prophet? And could this person also only be heeded as a prophet? Or could this person also heed the coming prophet as essentially, as Moses was heeded specifically, right, in a unique way? Okay. Or is this person all three of these things and completely like Moses or very similar to Moses? We understand that the Christians can only take their allegorical interpretation or their quote unquote esoteric interpretation or their symbolic interpretation, like I said, only discern them from Christian presumptions, where you can only take these things not objectively, but you can only take these things as true if you are indeed a Christian. Now, we see that Muhammad fits this description better, even though we of course reject him, right, as a prophet, or as the fulfiller of this verse. We see that he has a better comparison due to the fact that he was much more like Moses in the sense that he was a military commander. He led a group of he allowed leading a large group of people, especially the Jews, back to the land of Israel, right? He essentially brought, like you said, he brought law, right? He he essentially acted in mannerisms similar to Moses, right? He like I said, expanded his empire, right, or his reach to millions upon millions upon millions of people, right, in a very very similar way to Moses. Yet we do not see this for Jesus at all, and we rather see that Jesus, right, of the New Testament was, and I mean this in a respectful way, right, had generally the same following as, for example, the desert cults such as the Essenes, right? And we see that generally the response to this, which is coming from Neo, we have all like say, oh yes, we have the oldest interpretations of this verse as well. Well, like I said, old does not equal, more correct, right? Because once again, these very old interpretations, okay, which of course we as Jews have, like I said, I will present the Dalil for it after the debate to Neo. Old does not mean essentially that it is automatically true. It just simply means that a group of people had this interpretation a long time ago. For example, the Essenes take the Book of Enoch, the books, various, books that we reject as, non-canonical, and interpret it in a way completely paganistically and in a way that actually would offend the Greek Orthodox Church. But their interpretation is older, not the Greek Orthodox, the Orthodox churches in general, but their interpretation, once again, is older than the Orthodox churches. That does not make it correct whatsoever, or even historical. It's historical related to their group.
Okay, very good. And so, Jihadist, do you have a 1 minute counterpoint to use?
I don't have a counterpoint to that. I would rather just go to my fifth and final question.
Okay, so then we're going to go to our final round now, Yahoodi. So this is your question number 5, or if you'd like to use it to make a comment, we'll give you a few minutes to do that as well. So go ahead.
Final comments?
So you can actually do question number 5 now, or if you'd like to make a 3 or 4 minute comment, you can do that as well. If you don't have any questions, go ahead.
Yeah, of course. For what reason, right, should we as Jews, okay, accept Jesus essentially? Like I said, I'm going to ask this one more time. Accept Jesus objectively as the fulfiller to this verse, when according to you, we can only discern these things from the perspective of the early church fathers, okay, and from the perspective of the relative opinion, right? Opinion that was only relative to them. When we ourselves have our own interpretations that we authenticate, we either authenticate going back to our specific rabbonim, right? Or we authenticate going back to certain prophets, right? So going back to the certain people such as the Nevi'im and the Chamishim, the 50 people, right, that were following, or the various companions of the prophets as well, right? But you would reject these things as a historical, or would reject these things in general because of the fact, right, that they are coming from a different perspective that is not Christian. And you say that there is no evidence for this as a result, even though we could provide authenticators for them. I will not debate upon them for now because we're trying to debate Deuteronomy 18:18. This is once again the main reason why I'm using only textual evidence, right, to argue my points here, because I know this is common ground that we share. Yet we only see from you that your understanding almost solely comes from, okay, the understanding of the church fathers. So my question to you is, how should a Jew actively and objectively accept Jesus as the fulfiller to this verse when we do not have any sort of church father presumption.
Is that a rhetorical question, or are you directing that to somebody?
I'm directing that to Neo.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Neo.
Thanks. So, two answers as I did a bit earlier, and those are these. I'll start off by saying this: let every man be true to himself. It is only by fear, or in other words, humility of God, that we receive wisdom from God. Salvation and faith is not an ascent of knowledge, or it's not. We can't research our way to heaven, and we can't read our way to heaven. But the true reading, or in other words, faith, is in the heart, and it's only by humility that we receive the grace of God through faith to salvation. So it's not only by the historical writings. It's just I brought that up as evidence, which does show that Christ does fulfill every single prophecy in our Old Testament, including this, which is very interesting. You brought up the idea that we Christians are as these other little cults, in which this guy claimed to be the Messiah, that guy claimed to be Messiah. I'm not sure how many actually existed back then. Now, just because we don't have, I should say, the majority of people did not accept him back then, that was even a fulfillment of a prophecy. Our New Testament writings, first off, say that the Messiah came to his own people, but his own people did not receive him in the gospel according to St. John. That was almost word for word. Even in our Old Testament writings, which you have too, I think even the Masoretic says this. Well, it does. It says that the Messiah would be despised and rejected by men. That he'd be a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised and was not esteemed by them. And of course, again, our deuterocanonical writings, still from the BC times, say very clearly what would happen to him, that there were hypocritical and apostate Jews who would deliver him up, would reject him, would kill him. These were pre-messianic writings. But, so yeah, again, two things. First off, we have our historical accounts, which do serve as great evidence. And he's clearly fulfilling all the prophecies. But the most important thing, and I can't give you a piece of paper which has this on it, or I can't say this with my words, but let every man be true to himself. Let every man humble himself and truly seek God, remove all bias. And then he will see, according to God's promise, the beginning of wisdom. What is it? Humility, or the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So that's what I have to say.
Okay, very good. And Yahoodi, did you have like an optional counterpoint you wanted to use?
The Masoretic does not say that the Messiah, in this sense, will be despised as he was, for example, I know you're using the example of Isaiah 53. The Masoretic mainly refers to the nation of Israel in this case. When it comes to the people who believed in the Masoretic text, which are, of course, Jews today. No reasons for that.
Okay, Neo, I believe you used your question 5 last round to make a comment. Is that correct? Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, so then we'll assume
even
that
if I just believe so, I'll just do it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, sounds good. Then we'll go to Jihadist for the last question for this session. Jihadist, question number 5. Go ahead.
My last question is to Neo. Can you provide a direct reference that the Jews were incorrect prior to Christianity and affirm the authors of such evidence that predate Christianity outside of the Septuagint?
The second part was what again? Sorry, I was focusing on the first part.
I said, can you provide a direct reference that the Jews were incorrect prior to Christianity and affirm the authors of such evidence that predates Christianity? And this, I just want to clarify that this does not allude to the Septuagint. It alludes that Is there anything that we can point to in Jewish exegesis or Jewish works that points out their incorrectness?
Okay, so a passage that comes to mind is from one of our BC writings. These are BC writings in the Old Testament portion of our Bible. This comes from the book which we call Wisdom, or Wisdom of Solomon. And I can read it if you'd like to, or I can kind of scan through it a bit.
It's up to you. You have, I think you have another 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
So however you want to use that time.
Yeah. No, this is just one thing that comes to mind again, with the amount of time that I do have to answer. So let me find this for you. So first off, I'm going to post this in the VC chat so that everybody can get it. Chat. I'll put it in the about section, actually. Verses 12 to 24. Oops.
I'll give you another 30 seconds extra.
Yep, sorry about that. I typed it wrong.
No problem. Fine. There you guys go. Okay, so yeah, if you guys want to check the about channel, you can see what Neo posted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this talks about how the apostate Jews, those who call themselves Jews but are not, those who are circumcised according to the flesh but not of the heart, they misunderstood the truth given to them by God. They rejected him when he came, and they were deemed as hypocrites by the Messiah. They understood things according to what they thought, not according to what they were taught. They followed the traditions of men, not the traditions of God. They made vain the truth, the unseen truth of the law given to them by God, by taking it literally, by saying that it is a sin to just eat a pig, but didn't really understand the spiritual significance behind that allegorical, that symbolic law. It would merely symbolic, to say the least. And so that passage, Wisdom, chapter 2, verses 12 to 24. It is one thing that comes to mind. It's great. So that's all I got, by the way.
Okay, and Jihadist, did you have a counterpoint to make?
No.
Okay, very good. So that concludes session number 2 here, and we're going to move on to the Q&A. Let's see here. See if there's anything I missed here. Yeah, okay, so we're going to move on to the Q&A. So what I'm going to do is start just reading down from the top. So we don't have too many. It's not too bad. So I think we'll be able to get through this. So remember, participants, you have a maximum of 3 minutes per question for your answer. So we'll be keeping time on that. Okay, so the first question comes from Palindrome, one of our moderators. Let's see, he is a moderator, correct? Yes, Palindrome is one of our moderators. This is directed to Jihadist. Given how the Deuteronomy prophecy was given at around 2000 BC or so, exact year isn't important, he says in parentheses, why did it take until 600 AD for it to be fulfilled, especially given the context of God interacting with the very nation of Israel?
That's actually a very good question. Well, there are multiple answers to it, but I'll answer in the most, I guess, subscribed understanding of why it took so long. Number one, prophecies are not made for short things to occur. If a prophecy was to occur, it obviously would take time, and usually it's not as simple as it is. Like, for example, when God asks Ishmael for a promises Ishmael a great nation, that doesn't necessarily mean that on the spot or after like 10 years or 20 years, Ishmael will suddenly become a king and he'll have an actual great nation to rule over. No. Rather that it would mean that all the descendants of Ishmael would eventually have a great nation. Which, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, Jewish exegesis, Jewish understanding, not exegesis, my bad, and Jewish commentary, do believe that to be the Muslims of today, and that's why they considered us to be pious among the nations. And if I'm mistaken, Yahoodi can correct me here.
You're right.
So the understanding here that prophecies, it takes so long for them to be fulfilled, is not something that is given to us as knowledge. This is something only for God to know. We could answer and say simply that it's within God's infinite wisdom, and this was the best time to present such a thing, because then again, Mecca was at the highest point of polytheism at the time. There were literally idols set up all around the Kaaba, roughly 360 or even more. Arguably way more than any other nation had idols. Arguably, Mecca would essentially be the capital of polytheism because it had so many idols. Nobody here, and I challenge anyone to name a single country or a single city or a single area that had more idols than Mecca during that time.
Okay, is that your answer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, very good. And there's one other thing I wanted to tell our panelists. So for this Q&A round, we're going to get through this relatively quickly. We don't have too many questions, but I'm going to give each one of you one objection. So like after each one of you has 3 minutes to answer a question. And if you strongly disagree or want to object to something that one of the panelists say, you have one objection you can use and you'll get 2 minutes if you decide to use that. So just feel free to come on the mic if you want to object after they're done. And I'll I guess, what's the word? I will acknowledge you. Okay, very good. Okay, question number, the next question. This is directed to Neo, and it's coming from Abu Diego al-Maliki al-Athari. Do you consider that the prophet that has been talked about in verse 15 to be the same as, I think he said 15 again, but I think he means 18. So I guess verse 15 versus verse 18, do you think it's the same prophet? And what is the gospel that Jesus was preaching for you?
Can we make sure first that he is asking that? I read that too, and it looks like he quoted again a bit afterwards, said the same thing.
Did he?
15 and 15. So
yeah, I don't know. Is he here in the chat? Is he here in the voice chat or Abu Diego? Is he here? I don't see him. Okay,
we left. I assume that's it. I can answer.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome
like
to. Again, if you want to skip the question, if you feel it's too confused, I mean, it's not clearly stated. You can skip it, or if you want, you can answer. Go ahead.
So, yeah, I think I answered this earlier a bit, but he must have misunderstood the passage. I would assume that Yossi would say the same thing. I could bet my life on it. That the one spoken of in 15 is the one spoken of in 18 as well. Now, when I say the one, it's that ultimate fulfillment, which maybe Yossi disagrees with, but he still believes that the same prophets spoken of in 15 are spoken of in 18 as well, because 15 was just said in Moses' words, and then Moses says a couple verses afterwards that said, and this is what God has said to me, which is why I said the thing prior. He said, then the Lord said, I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren in 18, where in verse 15 he just says, as he's speaking to these people, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me. It's the same thing. So, and what is the gospel? What was the question? And what is the gospel that Jesus was preaching for you? To say the least, that he was the Messiah prophesied of, who came, God united himself to soul and a body, and came for the salvation of the world, to unite the two natures of God and man, building that mystical bridge by which we are saved, outside of which there is no salvation, to say the least.
Okay, very good. Our next question is from Hawks, and this is also directed to Neo. So he says, okay, so you said that Moses said a prophet like me was Jesus. So I think what he's saying is that phrase, a prophet like me, according to you, Neo, that refers to Jesus. But then he's asking you, but you disagree when Muslims say Jesus was just a prophet. So how do you square the two? Or in terms of, I guess with that phrase, a prophet like me, and then also, so accepting that as referring to the Messiah Jesus, and also at the same time disagreeing with Muslims when Muslims say that, well, Jesus was just a prophet. Or how do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So thanks for asking that. So this was in something I did get a chance to read in my introduction. Now, and this will answer the question perfectly. So I will say that when Muslims say that Jesus was a prophet, I disagree with what they mean. And so they say prophet in a certain sense. We say prophet in a different sense. Just like they say God is one in one sense, we say it in another sense. Though we do truly believe that God is one. Now, Christ is called a prophet. He's called a messenger. He's called the angel of the Lord. And of course, he's called the Messiah. Many, many other things. He's called the Lamb. And more, and the wisdom and power of God. But what is being said by these things? Again, these are the symbols, these allegories used to express a deeper truth that could only be seen by those who seek to see it. Our Saint Augustine says this in his writings on the Gospel according to St. John. He says that the woman said unto him, being unto Jesus, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet." And he says, "The husband begins to come. He's not yet fully come. She accounted the Lord a prophet, and a prophet indeed he was." This is St. Augustine. He's one of the greatest church fathers and philosophers and a great Trinitarian defender. He says, "For it was of himself, he said," this was Jesus Christ, quote, "a prophet is not without honor except in his own country," having to do with how his own people rejected him, that he came to. He says, again, of him it was said to Moses, quote, "A prophet I will raise up to them of their brethren like unto thee." Like, namely, as to the form of the flesh, but not in the eminence of his majesty. So we say that he's a prophet in that sense, as to the form of the flesh, and even in another sense, but not in the eminence of his majesty. And so the word prophet, when we call even God himself the prophet of prophets, he's given us the greatest of all prophecy comes from the Lord, from God himself, but unto men. And so he's the prophet of prophets in that sense. It's more of an analogous attribute, if you will, or name in that sense. Finally, St. Augustine says, accordingly, we find the Lord Jesus called a prophet. Hence, this woman is now not far wrong. Quote, I see, she says, that thou art a prophet. And so I hope that answers your question.
Okay.
So we just disagree with the Muslims' interpretation of that word. Continue.
Okay, thank you. Our next question comes from Lynette, and it is directed to Yahoodi. How do you see Jesus?
According to at least Jewish narrations, Yeshua, right, Jesus, was indeed a criminal, right? You can disagree with this, obviously. And the reason we do have witnesses for this wasn't done to slander the name Jesus in order to get some kind of support. It was done to mark down his positives and his negatives, right? Others say that these narrations speak of a different Yeshua, Yeshua Natsli, right? Others say that this speaks of a different Jesus of Nazareth, that there are different Jesuses in the Talmud and in our narrations, which have the same name yet differ from each other. But some say that Yeshua Natsli is not mentioned in the Talmud at all, such as the Tosfos, who said that he is not mentioned here at all, right? These sorts of criticisms. But in general, I believe that the Jesus of the New Testament, did not exist. Because the fact that we cannot rely upon New Testament narrations really for anything, and that is my main opinion about Jesus in this case.
Okay. Next question. So I'm gonna skip one. Yeah, we're getting close to ending. I think I gotta. Sorry, I just had a question from somebody. Okay, let me go back to the channel here. Okay. Do you consider Wayfarer? Okay, Wayfarer. We have a question to Jihadist from Wayfarer. What relevance do you believe that Deuteronomy 33:2 has to this prophecy in Deuteronomy 18:18? Paran referring to Mecca, for example, to be shedding light on. Or do you think Paran refers to Mecca, for example, to be shedding light on Deuteronomy 18:18?
Well, I believe that it may hold some relevance. It may not. I honestly do something we call tawaqquf on this understanding, and tawaqquf essentially means that we don't give out an opinion to it, and we rather just say that it is there. It may or may not allude to. But we do definitely say that the verse where it talks about Ishmael being promised a great nation is shedding light on 1818.
Okay, very good. Next question to Neo comes from Smoking Tire. Okay, so so Smoking Tire is asking, how is Moses a prophet like Jesus when you believe, number one, Jesus is God, and number two, Jesus was born without a father?
Okay, good question. So this has to do with something we were talking about earlier, Smoking Tire. So you asked, how is Moses a prophet like Jesus, or rather, how is Jesus like Moses? It says that the prophet must be, quote, like Moses, according to the passages we read earlier. And you said Jesus is God, for one, and then two, Jesus was born without a father. So, I'll ask you this to make a point, and then I'll give you my clear explanation. So, why do you believe that Muhammad fulfills this prophecy in Deuteronomy 18:18 when he had a different eye color than Moses? When his fingernails weren't as long as Moses' fingernails, when he smelled differently and was of a different height, was of a different race. My point is this, that, again, you have to have a standard by which you know how to pick apart certain factors of this analogy. Just like I said, and again, forgive me, my Catholic brothers and sisters, but they say because Saint Mary is the fulfillment of the idea of the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament, and because the Ark of the Covenant was made with incorruptible wood, therefore Saint Mary's body, or therefore Saint Mary's soul, must be also incorruptible, free of sin, and even free of original sin. How do they know which factors of the analogy to take into consideration? So I'm not dodging the question, but that actually is my answer to that question. How do you know how do you know to take these factors into consideration? We do see that he does fulfill the criteria which must be met according to the same book, Deuteronomy 34, saying what it is to be like Moses is to perform signs and wonders and is to know God face to face. And he must not give false prophecies, and he must not lead someone to a false god, to say the least. And he must be of a certain lineage and so on. So he does meet the criteria. And it's more of a false question. Forgive me, but I think you know what you mean. Or I think you know what I mean. So that's my answer.
Okay, next question goes, this is from Future Pilot to Jihadist. Why do you attack the reliability of the New Testament if Allah in the Quran says the Christians must judge by what they have? This is chapter 5, verse 46 to 47, or Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 46 to 47, and that the gospel was guarded from corruption, chapter 15, I forget what surah that is, verse 9. Okay, over to you.
Well, first and foremost, I did have the tafsir ready for this. If you open about the first thing that I do want to address is this part where it says Christian was judged by what they have. Yeah, of course. All Islamic understanding, and it's called Dhimmi law, is that each Abrahamic religion should judge by their own accord or their own accords, and that is fine, and that's mainly because of the understanding of the standard of living under an Islamic state. We can see this in the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, which I will post right here. Just give me a second, momentarily. From this website, it's from Al-Alim. We can take a look out. And over here it says in the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, and I understand that a lot of Christians try to bring this up based off what Sam Shamoun says, but I'm going to be quite frank here, and I'm sorry if I'm being blunt with any individuals here. Sam Shamoun has literally zero idea on what he's talking about. I watch his videos for comedy. It says here, let the people of the Injil judge. These are, and I just want to outline that these are usually Shamounian arguments, but I do want to point out that they like to avoid the full context of Ibn Kathir, and rather they read the scholar commentary on Ibn Kathir. But Ibn Kathir directly says here, let the people of the Injil judge by what Allah has revealed therein. Meaning, so that he judges the people of the Injil by it in their time. By it in their time. So he's saying the stuff that Jesus revealed to you during your time, you're supposed to judge by it. He's essentially saying that the Christians judged by what God has given them during the time of Christianity, and that should apply to dhimmi law, which is why Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu had an altercation with Christianity, because they wouldn't follow the exact things that Jesus said, but rather divinely inspired words based off what they think Jesus said. And it says here, or the ayah means so that they believe in all that is in it and adhere to all its commands, including the good news about the coming of Muhammad and the command to believe in and follow him when he is sent. So, if that is the case, if this is truly the question, then Diego, you must become Muslim today. If this is truly your argument, then, or if this is truly the question that is being put forth, and this is in question, and you take that as some sort of reliability session, then you should essentially become a Muslim, because it says here that you have to as well believe that Muhammad is upcoming. So it's obviously referring to the Christians of the time. It's not referring, and that should be carried over to dhimmi law rather than just modern day Christians. And as for chapter 15, verse 9, I mean, this is a very simple question. If you go to recitequran.com. I'm posting all of my evidences, by the way, in About, and you can take a look at them. In Surah Al-Hijr, it tells you right here in the tafsir that this is not talking about the gospel at all, actually. It says here that it is talking about the Quran. As we read together, and they say, O you Muhammad, to whom the dhikr, the Quran has been revealed. Verily, you are a madman. Why do you not bring the angel to us if you are truthful? 8, and we do not send the angels down except with the truth, and in that case, they disbelievers would have no respite. Verily, it is we who we revealed the dhikr, the Quran, and surely we will guard it from corruption. The dhikr is another name for the Quran, al-Furqan. Yes, and the reason why it's called dhikr, the Quran, and the easiest provided evidence that the dhikr refers to the Quran is that nobody has a chain of transmission or a chain of recitation for the Bible. There is no such thing in existence. And I'm sure any Christian would be able to validate that there is no just a recitation for the Bible. There is no recitation method. The Jews have a recitation method, and the Muslims have a recitation method. Now you could ask, okay, well, how do we differentiate whether it's Jewish or is talking about the Torah or the Quran? Well, right here it says, to whom the dhikr has been revealed, verily you are a madman. They're talking to Muhammad. They're not talking about Jesus. They're not talking about Moses. They're talking about Muhammad here. And it says, why do you not bring angels to us if you are truthful? We do not send the angels down except with the truth. And in that case, they, the disbelievers, would have no respite. So he's saying that the angels are there. You just can't see them. Verily it is we who revealed the dhikr, and surely we will guard it from corruption. This is talking about guarding the Quran from corruption. The Bible was already corrupted at the time, as per our belief. So it doesn't make sense that he would guard something from corruption when it's already corrupted. Plus, if you take a look at the transmissions of these verses, you'd notice that the verse that says that the Bible was corrupted comes before this. So this verse was revealed after that. So this clearly talks about the Quran and not the Gospel.
Okay. And next question. This is for Neo, and it comes from Muslim the Second 344. How can the eternally omnipotent, meaning all-powerful, omniscient, meaning all-knowing, all-seeing God encapsulate himself inside a feeble created body that is bound by time?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. And so, my Muslim friend, you're asking that question based on a misunderstanding of what we actually believe. We don't believe that the divinity of God was encapsulated inside of a body, or even when the scriptures say the fullness of God dwelt bodily, it's using dwell in a different sense. It doesn't mean literally dwell. Even God himself says, I cannot dwell in temples. He says himself again in the book of Malachi, I, the Lord, do not change. He cannot become he cannot be infinite and then become finite in the same sense, or I guess according to the same essence. He cannot confine himself to a finite space. And so what we do believe is this, that God mysteriously united his divinity, his infinite, ineffable divinity without size, to a soul and a body. it did not enter time and space because, again, he says, I, the Lord, do not change. He did not limit himself in divinity. If that answers your question, again, just we believe that he mysteriously united himself to a soul and a body without change, and that was even his eternal act. That's another topic, and I really love talking about that topic. But in short, that's my answer. So it's just, again, your question was based on a misunderstanding of what we believe. We don't believe that he was encapsulated inside of a body or confined to a space.
Okay. Next question. This is from Yusuf, and it is directed to Yahoodi. Let me try to rephrase it a little bit. Okay, so I think he's asking, why do you reject Muhammad, the son of Abdullah from Arabia, as being the fulfillment of Deuteronomy 18:18? Now, obviously, that's your position, but is there any possibility in your mind that it could refer to Prophet Muhammad, or is that something that you have 100% written off?
I am 100% sure it is not referring to Muhammad because of the fact that Muhammad could not be a proper prophet. I do want to answer his question about why I reject Muhammad, though. Listen, when it comes to Muhammad, right, we do not see anywhere, okay, in the Tanakh, right, in generality, in the Torah Shebechsav or the Torah Shebalpeh, the Torah Shebechsav being the written Torah or the orally transmitted Torah, right, that essentially this Muhammad or his teachings about Isa or about Zakaria or about Yahya, for example, these people in particular could in themselves be prophets. We see that the stories of the Quran greatly reject the stories of the Torah, right, or greatly reject the stories of the stories of the Tanakh, right. And essentially, therefore, if this person is teaching things which are which first of all do not fulfill any prophecy, any nevuah whatsoever, right? Nor does he fulfill it in the style that every single navi, meaning prophet, preceding him has fulfilled it, right? And in not fulfilling the prophecies the Messiah was meaning to, Messiah was tasked with fulfilling, right? When it comes to Isa, right? We see essentially that our hand is forced to reject the fact that Muhammad is a prophet. One will brush off these statements with an accusation of tahrif, which we also as Jews see literally no sufficient evidence for whatsoever. So Muhammad thusly, right, could not be not only a prophet but also thereby not fulfill this verse. Now another thing as well is that Musa alayhi salam, right, the difference is as well as that Muhammad did not inherit his nevuah, his prophecy from another, his ability to have prophecy from another prophet, where in the past virtually all written prophets have received their prophecy from other confirmed prophets as their students.
Okay.
With the exception of Ibrahim.
Okay. So next question. This is directed to Yahoodi from Bukhari. Do you believe that Prophet Muhammad fulfilled Deuteronomy 33:2? Because Prophet Muhammad had 10,000 saints. I'm not sure what that, and a fiery. I'm not sure what that's referring to, aka the Quran, when he was arriving back to Mecca. So fiery law. Oh, actually, he just added it. Okay, so he's saying 10,000 saints and a fiery law, such as the Quran, when he arrived back in Mecca. What are your thoughts on? So I guess basically, what are your thoughts on the Deuteronomy 33:2 in relation to Prophet Muhammad? Go ahead.
No, Muhammad did not fulfill this verse. Not gonna lie. The Christian interpretation of this verse and the Jewish interpretation are similar, if not the same. The thing is, right, is that there are two things. There is Midrash essentially talking about God offering the law to a variety of different nations and the mountains representing those nations. Seir representing Edom, Paran representing the Ishmaelim, where he gathered these nations and offered his covenant and they rejected him, right? Or offered some law and they rejected him. Or if it was finally revealed at Mount Sinai, where it was, the Lord shined at Mount Sinai, right? Where his law was finally accepted in completion, right? And it was thusly fulfilled in that, it was fulfilled for that generation, right? However, the Christian interpretation is directly from the text, which is almost the same, right? This talks about all the mountains that Musa alayhi salam, right? Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu went to, following the law, right? And encroaching upon and approaching a variety of people who rejected it, right? And essentially his travel along with his companions, along with the Dordea, the generation of knowledge, going all the way up to the land of Israel, which is also accepted by the Jews as well as a legitimate interpretation, a very legitimate interpretation. But when it comes to the 10,000 saints and the fire, when it comes to the 10,000 saints, the fiery law is obviously the Torah, right? But when it comes to 10,000 saints, the word is merava voice, merava voice hakodesh, right? Now, the word merava voice obviously is not a number, nor does it mean thousands upon thousands. The word merava voice simply is a word that talks about an unspecified number of things, right? Not saints, but things. Okay. It is not a specific number. It just means a lot of things, a large, large, large multitude of things that are holy. In this context, they would be holy. So, for example, God's rewards, God's angels, God, the companions of Moses, the various words of prophecy. These are all myriads, unspecified things. But the word voice I'm trying to stress is not a specific number. Yeah.
Okay, I actually have a personal follow-up question to that, Yahoodi. So I've not read that verse, but could that be when you talk about those things, could that refer to a large number of people, or is that outside of the interpretation?
I could refer to a large number of people, but I wouldn't say that this is fulfilled by Muhammad, especially because the fact that the focus is on whether or not he came with 10,000s of saints or Sahaba.
Okay. Okay, so next question from Wayfarer. This is to Jihadist. Can you give us some more points as to why Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is very similar to Moses? Peace be upon him. Peace be upon him as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. On top of everything I've said, Moses was also married. So was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Both had children. Both had their own religious law that was implemented, and both had essentially constantly Gabriel being the one that directly was advising them, as compared to Jesus. Whereas for Jesus, at least in the Christian narrative, and Neo can correct me if I'm wrong, he himself being God in the Christian narrative, there would be no need for Gabriel to be there advising him. Gabriel wouldn't advise God. And both essentially preach the same thing. And again, this is why Jews consider us to be pious among the nations, is because Muhammad's teachings, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Moses' teachings are not that different. In fact, there are some days where we ended up fasting on the same day and all these things, where people would confuse the Jews with Muslims, and they would say, and they would go to a Jew and call him a Muslim, or they would go to a Muslim and call him a Jew. And what ended up happening is that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had to make us either fast the day after or the day before to stop the confusion. Right? So I would say that's more points as to why Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is very, very similar to Moses. It's basically like a exact fit for fit description, and I'll even go ahead and say, even with the eye color, like Neo said, they do have the same eye color. Right, so I think down to a T, with the exception of maybe like height, and skin tone, I'd say they're pretty much similar. If you just wrote the descriptions without the appearance, you would think it's the same person.
Okay. So we've got our last couple of questions coming up here from Cash, and it looks like I think we'll end on a good note here. He's got some good ones for us. So the first, so he's got a 3-part series here. So the first, Cash is directed to Neo. So his question is: if Jesus is God and all knowing, how did he increase in wisdom according to Luke? I'm assuming the Gospel of Luke. And is it permissible to use the word Allah in Christianity?
So the first thing was Luke 2:52, if I recall. So when it says that Christ increased with wisdom and stature, what is it saying? And so it seems on the outside, again, we ought to seek the interpretation of the saints. Saint Luke clearly affirmed the divinity of Christ, especially his teacher, Saint Paul, which is why some of the people here really don't like St. Paul, because he was very clear in saying that Christ was the fullness of the wisdom of God and knowledge and stuff like that. And so the question is, how did Christ, according to that verse on the outside, increase in wisdom and stature? Especially when the same book says he has all wisdom and knowledge. So this is said in a metaphorical manner, to say the least. Christ also says that the Son does not know the day or the end. And then he actually, after that, tells us about the day and the end of the world. And so what was his point? What was the deeper point? Well, according to Christian tradition, that passage that I just mentioned and the one in question, Luke 2:52, is saying he increased in wisdom and stature in this manner that his humanity, which he took upon himself in time, received the fullness of knowledge in this sense, or wisdom. That his humanity, in other words, his human soul, in which we think and receive wisdom and knowledge, received from his divinity in time. Our saints say this. I can give you a source if you'd like to see one. Luke 2:52, according to the church fathers, the ones who passed down these writings to us. Saint Cyril of Jerusalem, I have his writings right before me. I'm sorry, Saint Gregory Nazianzen. People objected to him. So some heretics of those times who rejected the divinity of Christ, the unbelievers, they posed these objections to him as well. And he talks about all the things mentioned of Christ, which we do see right next to the ones that say he has all things and knows all things and has the fullness of God and is the fullness of God, is God himself in his entirety. People gave the same objections to him, which were these. He says, but in opposition to all these, do you reckon up for me the expressions which make for your ignorant arrogance, such as, quote, my God and your God? Interesting. I'm sure everybody's read that passage here. Forgive me, but that's just the truth. Or greater, or created, or made, or sanctified. Add, if you like, servant, and obedient, and gave, and learnt, and was commanded, was sent, can do nothing of himself, either say or judge or give or will. And further these, his, quote, ignorance, subjection, prayer, asking, increase, being made perfect, and add, like, even more humble than these, such as speak of his sleeping, hungering, being in agony, fearing. I could go on and on. And I'm reading right from St. Gregory of the early centuries. This is not a new thing, people objecting with these passages like Luke 2:52. It's making a deeper point, which, again, is seen by those who seek to see it. We've had one interpretation of that passage throughout history, and it is this, that his humanity received what it did have by his divinity. Not in time, not that it was a gradual increase of wisdom, because that would not be a perfect unity. But it is said in a metaphorical manner, according to human perspective, if you want to describe it like that. And so the second question was...
is it permissible to use the word Allah in Christianity?
Oh, yes. So I go to a Coptic Orthodox church. It's the ancient church in Egypt established by St. Mark the Apostle, by the guidance of St. Peter. We do say Allah in church. And on our screens, actually, we have some TV screens, so we don't have to look down at a book, a liturgy book, or a mass book, if you will. We have on the screen the English, the Coptic, and the Arabic of what's being said. And so sometimes they kind of go back and forth. They'll go between English and Coptic and Arabic, and it's absolutely fine. And the word was used by Christians before, of course, from our perspective, before Islam ever existed. Christians have used that word for God. It even sounds like the Aramaic and the Hebrew word for God. And so I think it's ilah in Aramaic, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't know how to speak the language. And
I heard the term, if I could jump in here, I thought it was Allah, but Yahoodi, you know Aramaic better than I do. What's the Aramaic term for God?
It's can be Allah, Ilah, Eloha, etc. There are various ways. Generally, if you actually look at the etymology of the word, it's basically the same as Allah. Like the word is, literally, generally, it's the same word as Allah, literally just down to the root. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, Neo, is that sorry, I did jump in there. Did you have anything final thoughts to say on your question?
No, just to sum it up. So I'll send you some sources, Cash, on that first question, so you can see the one interpretation throughout history. This is not a modern interpretation. We're not trying to beat around the bush and say, "Uh-oh, we made a mistake." No, this is the saints were faced with this in the earliest centuries of the church. And second, yes, we can say Allah, and we do say it in church. Even here in America, it's only that some people, unfortunately, have received
I'm sure you've heard the Allah is
moon
a moon god. That term. I'm sure. Sorry to jump in
Allah.
there, but
Allah. It's it's only a thing you'll hear in America, really, or maybe in some places in the UK and Canada. We're even these religions which do say these things, you won't find it where Christianity was revealed to the world by God Himself. You won't find that stuff in the Middle East, because what do they speak over there? They speak Arabic. They speak Hebrew, or they speak these other dialects and stuff.
The moon god, Muhammad chose a moon god and called it Allah. The Christians of Najran never used the word Allah before Muhammad chose that moon god. Then you're just making up a bunch of EBGB nonsense to try and side with your Muslim buddies. How do we know that you're not a Muslim doing takir? Okay, how can we even discern that?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you take that and your false apostolic succession doctrine and get out of here trying to subvert the Christian community?
Yeah.
Fake.
Okay. Well, we won't go too much into that. I don't want this to turn into like a comedy show, but but I feel your sentiment there, Yahoodi. Okay, so next question is going to Yahoodi. Is there anything that predicts Muhammad within Judaism, and is it permissible to use the word Allah in Judaism?
It's permissible to use the word Allah in Judaism. There was a rabbi who predicted Muhammad by his name, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Sefer Staros, and he said that he would lead the Jews back to Israel. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived in 120, I think around like 125 CE.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to that, or is that good?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. And then the last question.
Christian.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to say
okay.
fake Christian.
Okay. And our last question from Cash goes to Jihadist. Is there any proof that Islam existed before Muhammad? And is it permissible to use the word Elohim or the Father, the term the Father in Islam in referring to God?
Okay, well, in regards with the first question, yes, there is actually literally historical proof, in fact, on top of the factor of Mecca and the stone. But let's add here Prophet Saleh, right, which we in Muslims take to be as a very important prophet, and he's not mentioned in the Bible nor in the Torah, and is only mentioned in the Quran. And we could see here through just historical figures I'm going to post in about pictures of this area. It's called Mada'in Saleh, or as it was known back in the day as Thamud. There's a few pictures of the archaeological place. This is, and one of his stories is that basically God gave them a test, and that was that they don't murder a camel, right? And this camel was given to them by God, and the challenge was they don't murder a camel, and they listened to Prophet Saleh. And we could see through literal archaeological discoveries here that there was blood of the camel. They detected that. The footprint of the camel, they detected that. And the place where the camel fell is also detected on this piece of rock here. As well as, following over here, the inscription that Saleh did succeed in his mission and wasn't a false prophet. It says here in one of the inscriptions, this tomb is made by Ka'b, son of Haritha, for Raqush, Abd Minah, who died in Al-Hijr in the year 162 on the month of Tammuz. They had their own lunar calendar. May the Lord of worlds curse upon anyone who disturbs this tomb or open it, save his son, and further curse upon whoever may change the scripts on top of the tomb. So it's the inscription is clearly saying, and this is in Nabitian, it's saying what? May the Lord of worlds. Well, that doesn't make any sense. How could it say the Lord of worlds? when Thamud was a polytheistic account, as the Quran tells us. And this only mentioned in the Quran. Well, here's the thing. The Prophet did not know how to read Nabatean. It wasn't even a revived language at the time. It was dead. The Lord of Worlds indicates that Saleh did actually succeed during his prophethood, because it says here, "May the Lord of Worlds," and despite them being polytheists, they have changed that to Lord of Worlds. And we could see the differences here. For example, if I post an inscription of another tomb that predates this one, you can see that they don't mention Lord of Worlds. They mention something totally different. In fact, they mention their religious legality as something totally different. Over here, we see here in About as well. This tomb is constructed by Hani, son of Tafsi, for himself, his children, sons, daughters, and his descendants, and whoever has a legal document from Hani for burial in this tomb, no outsider shall be allowed to be buried in this tomb. This tomb shall not be sold or transferred, whether it be voluntary or obligatory donation, or be given to any outsider by a legal document. Contrary to the provisions provided in Hani's will, or other than by lease as per Hani's wish. So these are people who came before. And it says here, towards the end, it says, his family has the right to take over this place. Whoever does contrary would be responsible to pay 1,000 harithia. So they don't say that the Lord will punish them. They're asking for blood money. On the month of Nisan, the 40th year of the reign of Aretas, the king of Nabatean who adores his people, who the Nabateans took as God, by the way. And say, carved by Hur, son of Ahi, the sculptor. Son of Ahi, the sculptor. So they considered this man Hur to be a son of literally an idol. Right? So we could see that during the time of when Saleh came, we could see the valid difference here that that indeed Saleh did succeed in his mission, and he's only mentioned in the Quran, and he called to the worship of one God. And we could see the miracles that were provided above. The second thing is it permissible to use Elohim or Father in Islam? For the word Elohim, yes, you can use Elohim. Because let's say if you speak only Hebrew and not Arabic, it's not an inferred thing that you have to say Allah. Like I could say God instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this it would be perfectly fine. But in regards to the Father, this is where it gets very specific. You need to, if you want to use the word the Father, you need to use it without the hermeneutics, right? So it cannot refer to the Trinity. So if you say the Father and you're referring to the Father alone, not as the Father being part of the Trinity, then yes, you could use the Father as well. In fact, there's even a legal document by Abdul Wahab that acknowledges that yes, you can use it in the understanding of the Father being God.
Okay, thank you. So Wayfair, I was going to end here with that question by Cash, but we got two other questions in right after that. Should we take those two questions, or should we end the event over here?
I can take Yusuf's and Aquinas' question and answer them really quickly.
Okay. We'll finish with those two. But those are the last two questions, so no more questions after that, guys.
Right.
So we'll end here. Okay, Yusuf.
All right.
Question number 1 to Yahoodi is: do you think Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a bad guy or bad person? And then Aquinas. Well, actually, we'll answer that first, and then we'll go to the next question. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. All right. I take the opinion of the Rambam that Muhammad hallucinated a lot of the things that he did, such as the ideal of the angel, for example. Or there were other things that occurred as well that caused the falsehood to be placed in Muhammad's mind. But do I think that he was an evil person? Generally, not really. But also, when it comes to Aquinas says, sorry, Yahoodi, can you confirm? You just said that Muhammad is predicted in Judaism, or you're saying merely that he was predicted by a rabbi? The rabbi that predicted Muhammad was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was a key figure, a Gadol Hador, basically a large rabbi of his generation. He was a key figure within his generation among the Jews, meaning essentially that a lot of the things that he said and transmitted, I should say, were indeed a part of Judaism. His books of Nistaros, he predicted Muhammad, for example. And yes, yeah.
So
This is
Yehudi,
this. Yeah.
if I could ask a follow-up question, then what would be the significance of that particular rabbi's prediction, or what does that mean? Like, I guess maybe within his context or historical context, and within the larger context of Judaism. I mean, what would that signify?
Mhm. It would literally just signify the rabbi could see the future from the year 100.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and end our session there. You know, I do want to thank the panelists for being patient and you know, with this kind of unique format. And it was a little different, but I enjoyed it. A little more slower moving, not as but one of the, I guess, benefits is that, you know, we weren't like fighting and throwing insults at each other like left and right. And I do want to actually thank the audience as well. You guys were relatively well behaved in the chat. It seems like, you know, things went pretty smoothly. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I hope you guys all learned something and had something to take away from it. And I do want to thank each of our panelists for participating, Yahoodi, Neo, and Jihadist, as well as the other staff members here at Interlocutor Server who helped put this event together. So I want to wish you all a good night. Everyone, take care. Have a good night tonight. And ma salama. And at this point, we're gonna go ahead. Well, actually, Wafer, I want to ask you. I don't think we can unmute people in this channel, right? Like, would they have to move to a different channel if they wanted to talk? Or?
Hi, Hudson.
Okay, so. Okay, guys, if you have trouble, you're welcome to just exit and re-enter the channel. And at this point, we're gonna have an open discussion. You guys can stick around, you know, for the after party talk, and it's like open and you know, discuss with each other as long as you want. And yeah, and we're gonna end here and take care, everyone, and have a